I'm gonna put a list. Okay, so Aaron, do you want to start us off or do you want me to?
Yeah, you start us off and then I'll take roll if that works.
Okay, then I'd like to call the special meeting to order Thursday, December 2nd, 5:30 p.m. Aaron, over to you.
Sure thing. Thank you. Cynthia Albright,
Present.
Anna Higgins.
She'll be calling in.
Okay, I see her name on the screen.
Yep, sorry, present.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. No, you're fine. Bruce Barr.
Here.
Trish Greif.
Present.
Ed Hawkins. Gary Gentink. He's here. I just see you're muted, Gary, but that's fine.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. I didn't even see the mute button. Present.
No worries. Sonia Lucatero.
Present.
And Jason Ludden. He emailed me earlier today saying that he would be late, but he would be here.
And Gary, you may want to set, it looks like you're on your phone, maybe. You may want to just set it down instead of holding it somewhere, or turn off your video because it's a little bit, it's
Oh,
like
is it
being on a ship.
distracting? It's distracting.
It's a little distracting, like a ship, maybe.
Okay, yeah, I'll turn it off.
We might all get seasick after a while, Gary.
Yeah. Okay. No worries, guys.
But once you're
Okay.
settled, please feel free to turn it back on.
Okay, so now that we have taken attendance and we have a quorum, let's see, we don't have to deal with accommodations. We can get to the public comment period. Is there anybody on the call that would like to make some public comment for 3 minutes prior to us discussing Title 8, Chapter 8 and Chapter 18 revisions?
Madam Chair, just for clarification for the group, if you do wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand button towards the bottom center of your screen. Of the 5 attendees that are watching this meeting, we do have 1 public commenter so far. Mark Chappelle would like to provide public comment, so hopefully we can move him over and be successful with the audio. So Karina, if you don't mind, let's see if we can make this work.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, we can hear you. Fantastic.
Better than last week. Okay. Well,
Yes.
good evening, Madam Chair and Chair folks. I do have some quick comments. First of all, City of Sparks, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and the counties of Washoe, Pershing, Humboldt, Churchill, Lyon, Story, and Douglas do not have existing private tree removal permits required for trees on private property. Carson City's tree preservation ordinance only applies to city trees or the city trees that are 4 inches in diameter or larger that you're going to retain for credit. If this ordinance is passed as written, Reno will be the first in Northern Nevada, and I think Nevada as a state, to implement such requirements under section 18.04.105, requiring tree removal permits be obtained by private landowners on their own property. Moreover, these restrictions are down to as small as a 2-inch caliper size, which is the current city minimum standard. I believe that this is the city's reach for urban environmental controls and is at the heart of codifying these requirements. It comes down to a philosophy of ownership. Who owns these trees? How I read the current code revisions is the city and this board's view is it's the cities that the trees and landscapes within the city's boundaries, with minor exceptions, is categorized as green infrastructure. Therefore, the city code looks to protect and penalize all removal or injury to this green infrastructure. When is your tree not your tree? When the government thinks that it's not your tree. My opinion is this is a clear taking by the proposed updated tree preservation development code. The commission expressed concerns that there may be tree removals by landowners prior to a development application. Perhaps this is an enormous clue that these rule changes are going a bit too far. Why do I bring this up? Because what I see coming to Reno are things that maybe you don't want to come to Reno, such as preemptory tree removals by owners, tree sit-ins in protest, denials by of access by city employees to private property. I believe this is heading here. Now, I hope you've heard of the takings doctrine before. It's based on the Fifth Amendment, and a recent US Supreme Court upheld requiring the government pay just compensation to property owners when the government requires an owner to suffer a permanent physical invasion of their property, even a minor invasion. Now, this is a recent court case, June of 2021. The US Supreme Court ruling upheld and found for a California landowner that under state regulations granted access to their private property. In that case, a temporary trespass for labor organizing. The court determined this to be a de facto taking of the property owner's rights. This decision will almost guarantee opening the door to future legal challenges to government mandates that currently allow unfettered access to private property. With this decision by the Supreme Court, access to private land has the potential to be treated as compensatable taking event. So how does this line up with the proposed section 832.130 that makes it a misdemeanor and unlawful to interfere with the urban forester on your own property? In that same section, the city must be compensated for tree removals if they're hazard trees. Well, we'll see how that goes. Now, you may be familiar with Kello versus City of New London, which was a decision in 2005, allowing eminent domain assets to be seized by governments for their benefit. But this does not lower the bar to pay fair market value. You get my argument? If you're measuring the cost of trees for the ISA standards, be prepared to compensate owners for the loss of the fair use of their land using that same metric. In Reno's case, to inspect privately owned trees, preventing fair use of a landowner's use of that land, and then asking them to be forcibly preserved, or alternatively extracting compensation by that code, sure sounds like de facto taking to me. Now, calling it mitigation or protection fees and reducing it by half doesn't change the fact that it is an extracting development fee. I know that the Builders Association of Northern Nevada, NIOP, ASCE, and some current ISA certification holders have concerns, real concerns. This has been a slow boil since the city brought this to task for the planning staff in 2019. Now,
Mark,
yes, I know I'm running out of
over your
time.
3 minutes. No, you're over your 3 minutes.
Okay, I appreciate
So
you're
can you
listening to me.
Please wrap it up.
Wrap it up. I urge you to drop the fee penalties for private tree ownership. You can argue that these are anecdotal examples, but once the cat's out of the bag, it's unintended consequences. So thank you for listening to my discussion.
Thank
Mark,
you, Mark.
This is Naomi. Were you
Yes.
going to submit these comments so that we could have them?
I can if you'd like. Yes, I can do that.
I think it would
That
be
would be great.
helpful.
Mhm. That would be appreciated. Is there anybody else, Jamie, who has their hand raised?
No, Madam Chair, there is not.
Okay, then for the moment, we will close the public comment and we will come back to that at the end of the meeting. Item A3, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve, please?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you, Bruce. I have a second.
I second the amendment.
Thank you,
agenda.
Trish. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to agenda item B1, discussion and input regarding the tree preservation ordinance. Kelly Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to take a look at the PDF documents that were sent out, the updated versions of Title 8 and Title 18 that incorporated the comments and recommendations that we've received from the Urban Forestry Commission over the past 6 or 7 meetings. Now, there was a lot to go in there. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review those. The intent for this evening is to essentially ask for your blessing on those documents, moving them forward into the public outreach process, and just to kind of go over what we expect that to look like for the next couple of months. We expect to have a series of workshops with the public, technical workshops, and also workshops for the general public, potentially also some open houses for folks to come in and take a look at the proposed changes, including what has been recommended by the Urban Forestry Commission, provide staff with input. Once those public outreach meetings conclude, then what will happen is staff will update the draft and bring a revised version reflecting, the kind of some of the themes and changes that have been discussed during those meetings, bring that back to Urban Forestry Commission, likely in February of next year, where we would be asking for a formal review and recommendation to the Planning Commission Then Planning Commission would then do something similar, review those drafts, make a recommendation to City Council when it goes to City Council for first and second reading. So just that's the process in a nutshell and where we're at. I think we've got a couple of different options in terms of how we get through this evening's meeting. Chair Albright, I know that you did have some additional recommendations based on a review of the updated draft. I think that might be a good place for us to start for the ones that you may in particular want to just call out for the group to discuss this evening. Are you okay with that approach?
Sure. I thought we also discussed the fact that we have all of these comments that the Urban Forestry Commission individually went through and voted on as being included into the document, and you were going to discuss why they're still out into the margin.
Sure. Yes. And thank you for that question earlier today too. So it provides us an opportunity to clarify. So, you know, what you see in the draft documents that were sent back around, the black text that's in there is the original, it's the current adopted language. The red text is where you see all of the changes in that first draft that staff took to you. So, you know, that reflects significant changes from what the code was previously. And then the blue sections, that is all of the comments and input that we've received over the last several meetings from Urban Forestry Commission. And those are called out in blue to make sure that, you know, you can see where those changes, what they were made in response to your input. The what's incorporated into the text, kind of generally speaking, is what you will see is a lot of the clarifications, some organizational changes. What I would say is probably more like the non-substantive in terms of it's not making big changes to that initial draft, but again, a lot of clarifications that are in there and some organizational changes and, you know, other kind of minor updates. What you will see in the comments on the right-hand side are the areas where Urban Forestry Commission recommended a change that was kind of more on the order of a policy change, so something that may be a little bit more significant. And the intent in calling that out in the comments on this side is we want to make sure, one, that there's transparency in that process, right, in terms of some of those bigger items that were specifically discussed by Urban Forestry Commission, add transparency to it, and to, you know, reflect those recommendations to make sure that that is clear that those are recommended changes from the Urban Forestry Commission. So that's kind of the reasoning for the two different, I guess, ways that you will see some of those changes. And I know that Councilmember Dewar, based on an email that I think just came through a little bit before the meeting, that I know that you had some comments on that as well.
Yeah, my comments were that I found when I printed it out, I took a doc view so I could enlarge the type because I just need that for my viewing. And I also put all my comments in line. And so the way that instead of on showing as comments on the side, it shows in line, but it is highlighted in a blue or pink and two different colors on my two different drafts, but anyway, of the two different titles. But regardless, I was unclear why some things were in bullet, let's say, a comment form, and some were not. And so I just talked to Jamie as well and tried to explain my perspective. And here's my perspective. So the way that you show what the Urban Forestry did is in the blue type. That's blue, red was staff, proposed, blue was RFC or Urban Forestry. But where I don't understand it, it seems to be somewhat inconsistent, and I'll give you two examples. There's a section where we talk about, right, I'll start with Title 18, tree preservation. And it was a place where the Urban Forestry Commission decided to give greater credit for saved tree. So instead of giving a 1-to-1 credit, they were giving a 3-to-1 credit. So if you saved a tree over 6 inches, you didn't have to plant 3 smaller trees, okay? And you did not highlight that. That seems like a fairly big policy change to me. But then up just right above it, same section, there's a section here where the existing, it's item 2, D2, where it says this credit may count for up to 50%. And it's talking about existing protective trees. We crossed out the 30, but we put the 50 off to the side. I guess, in your comment. And so what's unclear to me is that it seems that we need to apply some consistency if you are going to do this practice of highlighting some of the urban forestry proposed changes. First of all, I think all of the urban forestry changes should be in the document. And then it should be whatever they recommended. If it's added language, it should not be underlined. If it's deleted language, it should be deleted. And if you want to go to the extent of further highlighting, like you think this is an extraordinary change or a special change or deserving of special attention, then consistently do, highlight it or identify it that way. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'm going to give you some real simple examples as well. Maybe over on Title 8, simpler. On the very first page on Title 8, on purpose, on the very first paragraph, there was some word change, there was some red, there was some blue. And at the very end, it said, and filtering noise and stormwater pollution. And pollution, the word pollution is again highlighted, like off on the side. And I'm not sure when I read it, and maybe I just need to pull up my PDF version here, which I did just do a minute ago. On Title 8, on the PDF version, it's in a little box. And the word pollution says, Reno Urban Forestry Commission recommends adding that trees also reduce crime. So I guess what I'm saying is if you went through the process of actually having the Urban Forestry Commission vote on everything, I mean, not just vote, but a roll call vote. So they definitely said something. And I think whatever they said should be in the draft, not still off on the side. That's kind of my basic starting point. And then the second layer is that if you feel like some of these things are deserving of extra attention, then it should sort of be applied throughout consistently. But I've never seen, I will just tell you, this is the first time in my long life of doing rule making, ordinance changes, that I've seen it handled this way. And I think about the legislature, I think about every ordinance I've ever worked on. I was mentioning to Jamie, we just did a liquor ordinance. All of the high level policy changes are usually highlighted by staff in a document, PowerPoint of some kind, saying here's the key changes, and these are policy changes. And I'm totally fine. And that's why this is sort of unexpected that you've selected some policy changes and not others for special attention, and that you didn't incorporate all of the urban forestry voted upon recommendations into the draft. And it's more of a question. I'm trying to understand your thought process and see if that's how we as a team want to move forward, or if there's another way we could add clarity.
Certainly, and thank you for the talking through that and your concerns on that. There are a couple of where you'll see comments in here too. I think that one that you called out in terms about the recommending that trees also reduce crime. That was actually one that I wanted to hopefully talk about with the group again, just because that is an item that I know that when we get comments back from our police department on reviews of projects, that sometimes they actually have concerns about additional vegetation being added in certain places. And so, putting that, like that particular one in there as a statement, is something that I kind of wanted to revisit with the group. But generally speaking, overall, totally understand, especially when we've got, lack of consistency about how some of those were handled. I think that's something that's, good to point out. I appreciate that because we can go back through and make sure that it is consistent throughout. And then I also know, Jamie, I think that you had some, there was a recommendation that you wanted to make on that front too, if I'm not speaking out of turn.
Yeah, no, I think that in this instance, it is a little different because of the number of bodies that will end up ultimately voting on this. And so, that is why I wanted to make sure everybody is always saying that, government should be more transparent. And I hear that and I take that to heart. And I think that it's also important historically to be able to have that record of, well, how did we get here? And so I like the idea of, making sure that we talk about what Urban Forestry Commission is recommending. I totally understand where Councilmember Doerr's perspective is coming from, and making sure that we call it things out consistently, whether it's a positive or potentially a negative recommendation. And I think part of the confusion will get alleviated with what that final draft that's actually going to get released to the public will look like. I had forgotten to mention to you, Councilmember Doerr, the colors will get more simple as after this body votes on the final draft tonight. We know there's several more votes that still have to occur before this is truly final. But so it's my intent that, once this body says this is the draft that we want to go out for stakeholder and other public body review, that will be more simplified, but it'll be the same situation of when we come back to this body of after getting all this other public input, you'll see some stuff in the columns as well that says, this is what NIOP would like. This is what, Planning Commission is recommending. That way, everybody has a very clear understanding of the things that will remain for discussion. I feel pretty confident that 95% of this is pretty much cleanup. It's a slam dunk. But I think there's about 5% of things that are going to require some more discussion until council, has that final approval. But I do think this group has done a ton of work. It is a lot of pages and it's a lot of words. But I think if Kelly's able to perhaps show a page that says, this is actually after the commission is voting on this, this is what the public will see. And I think it will make everyone feel a lot more confident in the document that's going to get shared out.
So let me ask you, oh, go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, I guess I would say, Councilwoman Doerr and Jamie, I asked Kelly to go through this at the beginning because I'm confident that this isn't what I expected to see. And I would like to hear from the other members of the commission if this is what they expected to see, because it was never presented to us in a way that this was how it was always going to be, meaning everything that we changed, whether it's deemed policy or not policy, was going to be hanging out here to the side. I think that when we started this process prior to Kelly Mullen, prior to Jamie Schroeder, we started this process with the intent of making significant and substantial changes to this document, because we have a significant and substantial tree canopy loss that's been going on in this community since I've been here, and certainly has been exacerbated in the last decade. So the idea was that we would be making text changes that are significant. And as a body, like Councilwoman Doerr said, we did a roll call of who proposes and supports these types of textual changes, whether they be policy or cleanup or otherwise. And so for simplicity reason, I love the idea that Jamie, we're going to track what NAIOP says and what the Planning Commission says and whoever else has an opportunity. But I think for simplicity reasons, it would be much better. And I would like to hear from my fellow commissioners if the black, which was historically there, is just completely eliminated, meaning this is the document that staff is recommending, and these are the changes and the recommended textual changes that the Urban Forestry Commission unanimously voted to have included into the document. So we're only seeing two colors, and that's what gets submitted throughout the process for input, rather than more bullet comments off to the side, whether or not it says public trees and plant material. All of that needs to go into the body of the document. And we have the original text and we have the Reno Urban Forestry Commission recommendations. And then everybody gets to comment. But I would love to hear if this is what the other commissioners expected, because I know myself, I was not expecting to see the draft that we would take action on tonight in this particular format, which is why I asked Kelly to discuss it.
And I just want to make a quick note before we go into the discussion, Chair, if you mind. Just a quick note, what Jamie had mentioned in terms of, like what it will look like to the public once this moves forward. Again, you'll just wind up seeing essentially two different colors with some comments. But it's, you know, it's not going to be the blue and the red and the black at that point. It would essentially, you would see, you know, generally how we would do this for when you've got a change in the ordinance is that existing text that's adopted is there, because that's how, like, when we bring it forth to the planning commission, say, they have to see that. They have to see the original language and those changes. And so you would see the original language and then the changes in a color. So those changes that are incorporated in that you saw the blue text that was going through in these documents, that blue text would wind up turning into red. You know, those right now, what you see is you see staff draft, and then you see Urban Forestry Commission's changes to staff draft. Sometimes Urban Forestry Commission was changing original text that staff hadn't touched. Sometimes Urban Forestry Commission is changing some of the text that staff had proposed. So what would go forward is not, you wouldn't see all of those different variations in terms of, you know, what you're seeing in the body of the text. Here, what you would see is that, you know, those track changes is essentially combined. And so you would just see, okay, original text, and then what those changes are to the original text, along with the additional comments and recommendations for the larger policy item changes called out to the side. And this is just, I tried to pick a simple page where there were not a lot of changes, so it was not, you know, full of red text, but just to give you an example of, you know, you see here, this is something that had blue and red before, now it just has a single color, and it has a, you know, comment off to the side, but hopefully that explains what the intent is on moving forward.
First of all, can you enlarge it? I would appreciate that if you wouldn't mind. But number two, can you explain it? Like a lot of what you just said made sense to me. Like you have to, and I would agree with you, and I'm sorry, Cynthia, but we got to have the black. Like that's a current ordinance. And if Kelly's saying she expects to combine the pink and the blue, I think that's actually very good. Because that's saying we have a unified draft going forward from the city that we're all working off of. Where I get confused, so I'm totally with you so far, Kelly, and we'll come back to the rest of the commission in just a minute. I just wanted to understand this. So let's just use this example. Determinations of soil suitability shall be made and verified. So you're saying this is a major policy change, even though it's mostly black. It used to say determinations of soil suitability shall.
So this particular one, you do not see updated language in there for that particular policy change. That was a recommendation that the Urban Forestry Commission came out of the Urban Forestry Commission for also requiring an engineer stamped soils report, just specifically discussing quality of soil for promoting tree growth. So that is an additional item. This is probably not the best example page to
But it's a
show,
great example because I think this is what Cynthia's asking. So far, so good. You've got the black, which is existing. You've got the red that we all agree on, red, blue, all combined into some, or pink and blue, now red. And then you're saying that the Urban Forestry said this, and I think you're saying you view it as a major policy change and you want to highlight it. The way it's presented on this page right now, it seems like it's like an idea, not something they maybe voted on. And so I think what maybe Cynthia is saying is incorporate what the Urban Forestry Commission voted on, incorporate it into the draft. If you still want to highlight it in pink or whatever color, because you think it's a major policy change, I think that's up for discussion, but I think that's a direction. Am I reading this right, Cynthia? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly what I was expecting. And that's why I wanted to hear from the other members to see if that's what they expected as well.
Okay.
Is there anybody else on the commission who would like to make a comment about that?
Yeah, I think that it should all be highlighted. Any change that we make should be highlighted like that, big or small. It's just my 2 cents of it.
What do you mean, Gary? Highlighted, like incorporated in the text, or just put off in a box as a possibility?
Or do you mean more like this where it's got the blue in there also?
Gary,
Yeah,
could you
Gary.
speak again? And
Oh, yes, exactly. As she said right here with the blue in it too.
but what she's done is she's combined the blue and the red or pink and made it red, which
Mhm.
makes it a consistent draft. But could you go back to your other one, Kelly? What the question here right now is the urban forestry actually voted on apparently some language here, voted to make determination based of an engine. Okay, so they wrote something here. And we're just saying, should it be incorporated into the underline and strike through, or should it be off to the side?
I think it should be underlined and straight through.
Okay, so not off to the side.
No.
And definitely a different color as a comment from the Urban Forestry Commission.
Yes,
Yes. Okay,
just for what I'm saying.
thank you.
So Anna has made a comment. I don't know why she's not speaking, but it says, I think all the comments need to be incorporated into the draft edits. It feels biased that there are some edits included while others are not. I don't know why she didn't speak, but she wrote it. Okay.
Bruce, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way as well. I don't know. We voted on something, and the reason we voted on it was because we wanted it included. Yeah, so I think that it's fine to have a comment off the side as to what our thoughts were on it, but or to say, yeah, we voted on this, but then what we voted on should be included in the draft. I don't really quite understand why it wasn't.
And Chair, I think you're speaking, but you're on mute.
I'm talking to my dog who's talking to me. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I learned at a meeting recently that you could press the space bar at our NAB meeting and let me see if it mutes me or unmutes me. No, it didn't. Didn't in this case. But anyway, Anna said something about her audio's out, so she's typing her comments for the moment and she's trying to get her audio working. But anyway, she typed her comment. And then were you trying to say anything more, Cynthia? Did anyone? Bruce already commented, Gary commented,
Who's coming?
Anna commented. So
Right,
back
but
to
I
you,
would-
Kelly. Is there a way to put the words in, still accomplish what your goal is?
So I think that one of the key things we wanted to make sure that transparency was there. So another potential option, you know, when we talked about what it'll look like kind of going out to the public and, you know, identifying those areas where they are, you know, not really just cleanup language or organization or clarity, but there is a policy change. We do want to make sure that is captured and clear and what that recommended policy change is, you know, the from and the to. So, I mean, we could potentially add additional language in some of those comments related to that.
But do we need to do that, Kelly? I mean, if the Urban Forestry Commission had a roll call or a rolling roll call that this is the language we want in the body, why do we need any comments off to the side? Why can't we just put it in the body and make it a different color? And my other question is, this does include all of the comments that were incorporated from my original draft that we went through line by line, word by word and voted on. They're all in here, correct?
So the ones where we had discussion on a number of them. I would say the vast majority of them are. There was some discussion that we had where it was decided that it wasn't a change that we were necessarily going to make. There are, I think, a couple of others where, you know, you had comments or questions, but not necessarily changes to the text. And so, you know, of course, those items, if it wasn't changed in the text, and we didn't discuss that, you know, we may have answered those questions separately. But all of the text changes that you had made and that were discussed with the Urban Forestry Commission, you should see them in here. if there was a concern that some of them aren't, please make sure to let me know.
Okay, so then I guess my question would be, because it didn't occur to me, Kelly, that today when I was reviewing this, and I apologize, I know you sent it to my work email before, but I didn't get it. So today when I reviewed it, I didn't think that I needed to pull up and compare word to word, section by section of the original comments that we went through, for 2 meetings prior to today.
Sure.
I just assumed that they were all incorporated because there wasn't a word that we discussed that we didn't discuss as a body that we all agreed either let's change it or let's throw it out. I just assumed everything that we made a universal decision on would be included in the body of this text. And I guess I'm not necessarily confident at this point, based on what you just said, that that is in fact true, that behind the process internally with staff, there were some decisions made that eliminated some of those comments for any number of reasons, what they are unimportant, but that they were in fact modified by staff and not reflected in this document. Is that a true statement?
I will give you an example. So the comments or the changes, Chair, that you had put in your proposed draft, you should see all of them in here unless when we were having those discussions, decided to go another direction. What I was talking about is that there were some comments or questions that you also had off to the side on some of the pages where we didn't necessarily get to address those during the meeting. One example would have been about, I don't remember which specific section or page what it was on, but it was related to speaking to like what the penalty would be if someone did not follow a particular standard that was in there. And we've got, we have a whole section under zoning code about, the enforcement process, about violations, about potential penalties. So, example there of question that was asked, not necessarily something that we talked to directly at the last meeting, and nothing necessarily to incorporate there as a result of that section being in the code in another location.
Kelly, on that point, I guess I thought that you guys were going to bring back a separate penalty matrix or share with us what's in another part of Title 18 or something, so we could actually have the conversation. And even if that conversation happens after this draft goes out, I still think we have to have the conversation one way or the other, right?
Certainly. And just to speak to that, we did have a pretty large meeting the other day with our legal team, with the enforcement team, development services, with parks, specific to enforcement. And the director of our code enforcement, Alex Woodley, did have some comments that he wanted to bring up related to that when it comes to enforcement of tree-related code standards, that in the past, it sounds like, and I think one of the bones of contention for you was that, when several trees were impacted, that they were essentially given a single penalty, like the first penalty is usually $100 and then it increases, depending on the number of citations. And that what we had talked about in that meeting was that is something that, assuming that these are trees that there's some evidence, say, they're required to be installed on a commercial property and that's on the landscape plan, and this is something that was removed, that then they have enough evidence to be able to go back and say, okay, for each tree, the penalty would be this. So that's something that is in existing code that could potentially just be applied in that fashion, assuming though that evidence that is there that code enforcement can lean on.
So you're saying the number doesn't have to change, just the way that it's applied. And that makes sense to me. It made sense 7 years ago. It makes sense today. So I hear you. Let's go back to the issue at hand so we can get this resolved. Are you okay with putting what the urban forestry voted on into the draft? And that's my first question, instead of off to the side.
I think that we can do that. I just want to make sure that that you are aware that what we'll likely do in the comments is to make sure it's clear this is what it was, and this is what the Urban Forestry Commission voted on to change. And I do want to make a note too on this particular page where, you know, you see where it says RUFC voted to make the determination. This was just an example of kind of changing the text based on assuming that Urban Forestry Commission, you know, votes to move that forward, it would go in there. This was not, just as an example, this was not one of the roll call vote items where we had specifically gone around the room to, you know, ask if there was consensus on a particular item. But that particular language we had talked about putting in after.
I
tonight's
thought
vote
all of them
occurred.
were pretty well covered. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
guess
what
I
are you
thought-
saying? The note here says they voted, but you're saying they didn't vote? Or they
No,
voted as
I'm
more of
saying
a
this is
body,
an
not a roll call?
This is an example of an updated comment that could be made. It could be worded in this way after whatever the vote is this evening. So like the previous version of this comment that you would have seen in your draft was RUFC recommends versus
Okay.
RUFC
Well, here's
voted.
the question, Kelly. We've just heard from several, Gary, Anna, Bruce, Cynthia. We're yet to hear from maybe one or two others that they would like to see their words into the draft. Whatever their words are, I mean, they want to see them in the draft. If you want to highlight them like you have here with the word made in a different way, that is your prerogative. I mean, if you guys want to do that, you can do that. But I'm asking you, if you do that, to be consistent. In other words, it's your thought process, maybe yours and Jamie's, that this is a significant policy change and you want to highlight it. I may or may not agree, but if you want to do that, you're the staff, then do it. But at least put their words in. Like if they wanted to delete some black and add some red or whatever it was, do what they said and then do your highlight. If you want a comment off to the side, that's fine. I mean, I really think it's a level of attention that I've never seen and literally 30 some years of doing this. And what most people believe that the blue, the red, the underline, the strike through is very transparent. It is telling people what is changing. Okay.
Right.
It is the thing that says, hey, look here, we're in red, we're underlined, or we're in red, we're blue, we're strike through. We are drawing your attention to this change. Usually when you see it, the legislature, they don't say, now watch out for this one. This could be a really big thing. And this, on the other hand, is a small thing. That is for the reader to interpret, whether they think it's a big or small thing. And that's where a little bit of the struggle is. And I think that's why we got the comment from Anna. I'm just going to read it again. Which says, she thinks it feels biased that there are some edits included and others not. So I think what I'm interpreting that is that I'm not sure that it is useful. I mean, maybe useful in some level to highlight certain changes, and that's where it's a judgment call. Okay, but let's go with number one first. Are you okay with putting in the words that the Urban Forestry voted on? That's the number one.
I guess I would say, and I'm going to speak up as the chair, and having been, you know, working diligently on this for as long as we have, with all of these commissioners coming to all of these special meetings to accommodate this compressed time schedule, we have all voted on this language that we want to see this this chapter 18 and chapter 8, all of these comments incorporated into the body of this document. I mean, I think that is exceedingly clear. That's what we expected. This is how we've gone through these documents, word by word, line by line, section by section. It's undeniable. This is what we want to see here. Just like when I served on the charter committee for 4 years and we made significant changes. It wasn't called out to the side. It was in the body as a strike through or an underline. It was deleted or was added. And that's what we took to city council for their approval or denial, one way or the other. It wasn't something that we pulled out here. So I think it deserves to be in the body of the document, and it can be it should just be an insertion or deletion. And if you want to, you know, highlight it or make it a different color because you feel that it's something to make a note of, that's your prerogative. But all of our comments are worthy of putting into the body of the document and allow the reviewers to make their own decisions about whether they like it or not. And let's track all these comments from all these different interest groups and stakeholders. And I'd like Matt's opinion. I mean, Matt has been working on this along with you, Kelly, and us for a long time. I mean, Matt is what do you think about how this is laid out and the commentary that you've provided for, you know, based on your experience in the field of trying to make sure that, you know, we get, I mean, we don't want to be unruly or unreasonable. We just want to have some protection that the materials and plants and trees that are specified go in properly, they're well cared for, and you have the ability to, you know, work with the community to make sure that we achieve these objectives, which is a larger tree canopy over time.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm not even sure that Matt should answer that because I don't know that I really think this is a commission thing.
Okay, well,
I
I
mean,
know that
he
he's
has
just
been the
provided comment to
substantive,
staff.
well, he's
and
been
I
the
just-
substantive advisor and,
Okay.
and the technical expert, but you're talking here about how it should be presented. And I think you're asking that the commission's words be presented. And I guess
That's
we just
correct.
have to hear from Jamie or Kelly how to handle that.
So I think that we can include those. We'll add, like we mentioned before, we'll add a little bit of additional clarity in the notes. And I think that will get at what the commission is requesting. I want to ask Jamie though too, if she has additional any additional thoughts on, you know, process or format or any of this. Certainly, yes, she and Matt have been integral and very much part of this process. So I want to make sure that they have an opportunity there too.
Sure, please.
Matt, do you want to go first, or would you like me to provide my insight?
Go ahead, Jamie.
So I think we can get there. You know, this body certainly has the ability to make the recommendation to council, and I think we can incorporate your comments within the document. And then again, for historical purposes of how we got here, the let's say, I understand where Kelly was like, I'm just trying to show you a simple example, but let's say under 6 where it says placement of lighting, let's say placed outside the limits of planted tree growth was a substantial policy change. So it would show up in the document as the red line, as this is what was added to the document. And then off to the side, the comment would say Urban Forestry Commission voted to make this change. And then that way the commission is satisfied, it's in the document. And then staff, as we know that this is going to have some significant impact for how we're going to get across the finish line, we still have the comments in the column so that we can get this across the finish line. And again, I still feel like 95% of this is going to easily make it across the finish line. I just am trying to make sure that we have a path to yes, because this group has been working on this for so long, right? Like you have Kelly and I, we want to make sure that we get this through the finish line because this team cares about it. And we want to make sure that when this is adopted, that Matt is able to do his job and he is not stuck in gray areas.
Thanks, Jamie. Would you like me to? Oh,
I just stopped sharing. Sorry.
okay. I guess if I can make a comment, I think it'd be nice to see just, I guess, the comments on the side to see what everyone agreed on. I think there's still a few areas in there that I'm not super comfortable with yet. I think we're in the right direction. I think there's a few areas that I was hoping we can discuss today. Just, very few specificities of the soil quality approval, and the size of trees that we're installing and exactly what the agreed upon penalties will be for removals. But to Jamie's point, I think the vast majority of it, I think we're all on the same page for the most part. I think it would help if those comments were there so that everyone could see that we are on the same page. So I'm hoping that we can kind of touch on some of those more specific issues tonight and get those agreed upon with everyone.
So let me clarify here, Matt, because now I'm kind of confused. What you're saying is you still have some questions about some of the substance. Either it went too far or didn't go far enough, or it wasn't written the right way, right?
I guess based on internal conversations, I thought it would be a little bit more specific about what some of the requirements are, and I'm not sure.
Okay, so it didn't go far enough, it wasn't specific enough, or it didn't say the right thing. I'm just trying to understand what you're getting at here.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that a couple of those small areas we can discuss now.
Yeah. You would like to address or fix some things.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about it.
But that's fine. I mean, that's why we're here tonight, is to kind of do a polish, right? There's some things in here I've identified that I don't think we meant to be this confusing. I'm going to identify them when we get to that page and say, hey, I'm sure this isn't what we really meant. So we got to clarify it. So there's something like that. But
Right.
What we're talking about right now is a style of presentation. What I've heard from 4 commissioners, I'm trying to be a facilitator here, as well as I also have an opinion. I'll acknowledge that. But what I've heard so far is that the commissioners want to see their comments, right or wrong, into the draft. That's what I'm hearing. And if the other staff want to somehow identify some of those comments and say, I'm going to use the words because I don't know what else to say. Warning, Will Robinson, this is a major policy change. Fine, do that. But here's my, I've already said why I don't think that's such a good idea, but if you want to do it, okay. It's an extra level of highlight or focus. But I want to just make sure that the words that they voted on are in the page. I also would like to see, like you brought up a point, Kelly, about criminal. I am fine to take that out personally, but I'm interested to hear what the commission says. No, but I don't think anybody's going to die over those words, taking that out. Nobody is looking for extra, complication or unexpected concern. You want to try to screen all that out. So this is a good time to do it. Like read it as a whole, say, oh, did we really mean to say that? Totally. So I expect some of this to drop out, like to your point, those words not be included. But as a concept, I think the team wants to see their words included, for good or for bad. Some of those words may not be approved. Some of those words may be criticized. Some of those words may be fully embraced, but they still want to see their words in the document, and work through the process.
So yes, I think, based on this conversation, and this is good to have this, with the group, kind of following what Jamie had mentioned, and having that, and what we've talked about in here is having the language changed per the Urban Forestry Commission, essentially incorporating what's in the comments into the language itself, having that shown as strike through or whatnot, whatever it is, or additions where appropriate, and then potentially adding a little bit more information if needed in the comments themselves. But then we'll have them both. We will have those both there. So that's what, based on this conversation, the format that we would take out.
And let's use an example, and then maybe people can get a better comfort zone. So I'm going to start with just the title, chapter 8.32, trees and shrubs, plant material. So we have the word trees is sort of highlighted as something special. The word and is in black. The word shrubs is struck out. The word plant material is apparently okay. What I don't know what you were trying to say here about this is whether it says RUFC recommends changing the chapter title to start with public. Well, just put in the word public. Is this a giant policy change? That's what I would like to know, like now, like, are you thinking it's so significant that it needs to be with a side bullet on its side?
And like I said, for some of the other ones, they were items too that was hoping to actually talk about with the group. I mean, certainly, is that a large policy change? No, but it is, we do talk about private nuisance trees, right, through the in chapter 8.32. So generally speaking, most of the time that chapter is related just to public trees, but it is also about private trees that are deemed to be a nuisance and that the code enforcement or urban forester indicates needs to be removed, right? So that's also an opportunity for, is that something that do we want to make that change? Is that a large policy one? No, but some of these are triggers also to potentially have discussion as we go through this.
This is very good though, Kelly. I mean, asking people, are you sure that you really want that word public there? I think is a very reasonable question, because I'm not entirely positive we do myself. I mean, given the point you just made, that we discussed this as we went, that there were mostly sections about public trees, but there were some sections about private, and maybe it just needs to be remaining trees. I mean, that's why we needed a few of these sessions. I mean, maybe one, maybe two, but to see the words in the page and say, when I was rereading this as a whole, I realized, instead of just section by section, when I read it in whole, I realized that 5/8 of it was about public trees, but there were sections about private. Now I've reconsidered each person saying to themselves whether this should just be called public trees. But it's hard to have that conversation the way it's presented with these side comments instead of integrated, because you don't see it of a whole cloth, But I think we'll struggle through once we. But okay, I understand. But you were hoping to actually talk about this word public tonight.
There are a couple of comments that are in here that I think that we would like to get some clarity, or just ensure that we've got agreement from the group on. That is one of them.
Okay. Last thing I'm going to say about this is just being careful about this. We adopted a new master plan. We're implementing a lot of ordinances to implement the master plan. They have to go through watersheds, drainages, there's stuff in there on cable. I mean, there's things on all kind of stuff, right? That they have to go in, they being the staff, and adopt, probably you and the team have to adopt new ordinances to implement the master plan. The master plan was new and unique. It changed stuff. On the subject of trees, there's tree stuff throughout the master plan. So I think there was an expectation, at least from my part, that there would be policy changes. We had the ULI report, the PUMA report, all said trees have to be treated differently. It didn't say trees have to be treated the same. So I think when Cynthia said very early in this meeting that there was expectation that this is changing policy, I think that's what we all thought, yes, cleanup for sure. And as we got in there, we realized really how good the original words on the page were, but they needed more clarity. But there also needed to be some policy changes, like this mitigation concept and ratios, and to Matt's point, soils weren't addressed. So I don't think anybody was surprised to have policy. And that's why I'm just saying that we just have to be super careful on what you decide that you want to highlight as a big policy change and what you want to highlight as a small policy change, because everything is, different people view it differently. Okay, just some thoughts. Back to you, Cynthia. Bruce.
Could I speak to this particular paragraph? There's one thing. So there's apparently an issue with adding reduces crime. I remember specifically we talked about this paragraph and kicked it around, kept adding things to it. I think we could have just, where it says they provide economic, environmental, and social benefits to the community, including but not limited to, and then gone from there. And you can cut out, we could have cut out a few of those. We didn't have to put every single benefit that we can think of that trees have. They have a lot of benefits. That's just kind of a point of view. I mean, and that would eliminate the police department potentially having an issue with us saying they reduce crime. I mean, I think there have been studies showing that it does reduce crime. It improves mental health. It does a lot of good things, but we didn't necessarily have to list every single benefit in here. That's just sort of a thing that I had, and then we could just eliminate the one reduces crime, and we know it's in there in our intent, but that's just my thought on that.
It's a great point, Bruce. I mean, we certainly don't need that, like you said, add everything in here to make it, more. We want to have text in here that contributes significant value to our overall objective. And I think there's plenty of in number, in purpose, there's plenty of words in there that demonstrate the value of trees. So if Kelly believes that this could raise some ire in the in the police department, then we don't need to add it. If the word public in front of trees creates a potential misunderstanding because we do talk about private, then we don't need to add it. I mean, that's what having these comments out here are helpful for now, to go through one final time and make sure that we do hear from Kelly and why they're pulled out to the side, and maybe give it that second thought process before she does incorporate all of the other comments into the body, so that it's clear. I think I would assume that this document would be preceded by a staff report, and whether it be a paragraph or 2 pages, it would say that, over several meetings over so many months, the full body of the Urban Forestry Commission voted to make these changes, and these changes are noted in X color. And that's sufficient for the reader to understand that there was a document, there was some staff recommendations, and there was an Urban Forestry Commission aspect. And this is how it's laid out, plain and simple.
So let me just ask the group then, on those 2 comments, is there concern about if we were to not include the word public in the title and not include the part about trees reducing crime?
I would say both of those are accurate, Kelly. I would say, though, that we could add right after including, we could add, but not limited to.
Okay. We'll incorporate that. Okay. Now, we brought this up initially just as an example, Councilmember Dewar, as you were kind of going through some of your comments. So we can, I don't want to necessarily start going through this.
It's fine.
Okay.
I think you've heard from the group. It sounds like you're willing to make the changes and incorporate their comments, and they're very willing to hear what you have to say, and they've already agreed with 2 things that you have right here.
Okay, so, and what I don't want to do today is drag us through where we're going past, 8 o'clock and trying to go through all of the text again. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go down to the next set of comments that are pulled off to the side. I think this is another one that's just kind of a, hey, this is about the tree list, and we've talked about, the names of the lists are going to be changing, and is it going to be approved tree list or prohibited tree list, and that still has to happen. So that note is in there as we're going to be changing. We'll change the name. That has not happened yet. So that language will change, but it's not,
Kelly,
there's not a recommendation specifically there yet.
are you going to just automatically discuss the very few comments that I provided earlier today? Or do you want me to just quickly run through those just for the clarification and benefit of the commission? Or how do you want to handle my couple of comments?
No, I think
and maybe others have comments too.
I think that would be great, Chair, especially, if there's certain ones that you want to make sure that the group has an opportunity to discuss. I know we talked about that some of them are just kind of, for our consideration, but definitely the ones that you want to make sure that the group has an opportunity to hear or discuss.
Okay, well,
please go ahead, bring this
I
up.
think the most important would be 832.020, which would be the duties of the urban forester.
Yes.
And under this long list.
It was under this one.
Yes, under this long list. it was my suggestion that we add where it says supervise all work done under permit in accordance with the terms of this chapter. I thought it should be clarified based on previous concerns and actions that have occurred in the field when Matt goes out to inspect landscape installation, that it be clear to the reader that he has the opportunity to inspect the tree pits and the soil volume. And that would ensure that the trees are planted properly. And he may not have the time to go out and inspect all, he may never get out and inspect, but at least it puts the reader and the installer on notice that the city's urban forester has the opportunity to do that. And I just think it needs to be clear that that's what he's looking for in addition to other things.
And I think what we had talked about earlier was updating that language to say supervise and or inspect all work done. Based on your comments there, where we could potentially include, let's see, supervise and or inspect all work done under a permit issued in accordance with the terms of this chapter. And we could add something along the lines
To
of
include, but not
including,
limited to,
yeah.
To include but not limited to soil volume, tree pit
Is
size
there
and
another,
depth.
is there another more like technical term for tree pit, or is it tree pit?
I'm going to refer to Matt.
I would just say, tree planting site, because it could
Perfect.
apply to various different types of installations.
Thank you.
Ask a question, Kelly, and everyone, Matt. I thought in another section of here that it gave the urban forester permission to enter the property.
Yes, it's somewhere in here. Enter upon private premises with proper notice at all reasonable hours to inspect the premises where
Yeah.
they may reasonably suspect a
I
violation.
just wanted to make
of this
sure. I thought
chapter.
I had seen it. It's here. It's already part of the old language. We just added proper notice. Okay, so I feel good about that. So you're allowed to enter. And then this section that you guys were just highlighting was supervise. I think that's proper. I mean, for example, every place else I've worked, let's say it's drilling wells, the well driller, people on the agency were allowed to go in and inspect and observe the drilling of the well. The stormwater people can go observe the installation of the stormwater system. They're not going to get out there and dig the hole, but.
And Chair, were there other sections in chapter 832 that you were particularly wanting to discuss with
The
group?
only other one worth noting that we talked about that is, other than just some basic cleanup, was the addition of the term median in the definitions. Since there is median referenced in the document and that there isn't a definition of what a landscaped median is, where we define parkway. That was the only other one.
Okay, that's something we'll check with our public works team to see if there actually is, if they have a definition that we can copy from. Otherwise, that can be created. Was that the
Kelly,
last one? And go ahead.
Well, this was one of mine, was about the definitions. So we talked about this over and over again. And when I read this, it talked about, I was on 18, but I think it applies to 8 as well. It says about the definitions, and it said these definitions, maybe you could just explain what happened to the definitions.
So in 8.32, which is what's up on the screen, there were in the existing text a whole bunch of definitions already in that. My suspicion is because Title 8 itself covers a variety of topics. It's not just about trees and shrubs. Obviously, that's specific to this chapter. With Title 18, what we did was, I'm going to bring that up, added a section referring to where the definitions are located And the reason for that being because we have a whole chapter of the zoning code dedicated to definitions. And I think it would put us in a somewhat squirrely place if we started within each section, adding the definitions that are included there, because they are, they are in one place. They are in the chapter 1809, where we have definitions across the entire zoning code. That is the, designated location for them.
Right,
And
but
so,
we just didn't have those. Like, I didn't see that we had 1809.
So, okay, in terms of what you saw in your draft, no, what happened with that is because it is so many pages, dozens and dozens of pages of definitions, that what was provided to you were just where we were talking about making potential changes to some of the definitions that were in here. So this is a very minute excerpt from chapter
Right.
1809.
It was the last page.
Right, where you will
Right.
see some of those in there, where we added a few or made some changes. That was the only definitions that you'll see.
But that was okay with me. It's just that I thought we had more. So maybe we did.
And yeah, we have, like I said, there's dozens and dozens of pages of just the
No, I mean,
definitions.
just on trees. I mean,
Oh,
and maybe I didn't end up with the whole thing because you actually have more. Like you have well, actually I have the ones here showing. I just thought there were more tree ones, so that's fine.
and there are. If you go into 1809, you'll see significantly more definitions that are out there. And again, they're just not included in this because no changes were proposed. We weren't making any edits in them, so we try to just include what we were recommending changes for.
I understand. Okay.
I'm gonna go back over to 8. And then Chair, you had indicated that was the last major one. Was there anything else from the
I had
group?
a major one, I think,
Okay.
since we're in 18. The part
Are we
that was
18 now or 8?
outstanding,
Oh, sorry. Are we? Yeah, we're in 8. You said 18, Councilwoman Dora.
right, that was where I had the major change. So
Okay.
I thought when she said major change, she wanted all of them, but okay, well, I'll wait.
Okay. I just want to make sure we get through 8 and we can make sure everybody's good with any other blue boxes off to the right.
Yes, and this was just a change of the may versus shall, which we'll incorporate in the change. This particular one, this is in the section on public tree appraisals, where there was a cap proposed. So within any 2-year period, that there's a cap in terms of the amount that could be charged for the public trees that would potentially be removed associated with the project. I know that Councilmember Dewar had recommended not including a cap, and that was something that that I don't know that we fully discussed as a group, and that was another reason that it was called out on the side.
That's fine. The reason I don't is I've never seen any kind of regulation that included a cap. Like I'm thinking back over 30 years of regulations that I've worked on. I mean, if you do 10 things, then you got to be held accountable for 10 things. If you do one thing, it's one thing. If you do no things, it's no things. So I didn't understand this concept. I'd never seen it before. So that's all.
Is that a conversation that you would like to have right now?
Sure.
We can,
I mean, if
okay.
you wanted to have it, I'm definitely ready to have it.
So this was actually a concept that came out of the last version of the tree protection ordinance when it was initially floated back in late 2019 and early 2020. And my understanding is that that having that cap in there and how that was structured, that was something that was put together after conversations with a number of different stakeholders. And Matt, I know that you were part of those conversations. So I don't know if there's anything additional that you wanted to add in that, but intent overall was to make sure that not something that we've got a development project coming through, that the fee that would potentially be charged for removing some of those trees would not be, generally speaking, should not be expected to be so high that you could never develop the property.
Well, of course, I mean, so is the anticipation, like, for example, you just said you talked to the group, your enforcement group, and they, I can't quite tell whether you said they discussed, acknowledged, agreed that it should be the initial penalty $100 a tree versus $100 per site. Okay, I can't really tell from, you said they talked about it, but I don't know where the talking resulted. So my question here is, this is without an example. This is very hard to understand. You could have a forest that's clear cut and the people say, well, the property is worth, $500,000 and 15% of that, is some number. I'm looking, doing math quickly.
75.
Maybe it's
75,000.
7,500.
75 grand.
Yeah, 75,000.
Okay.
And I mentioned
75
this to Kelly earlier too, that
Oh, you
we
did?
needed a little bit of clarification on this. It was,
In terms of the time frame and what that meant.
Well, there doesn't seem to be a rationale for it. I mean, maybe it should be 5%. Maybe it should be 25%. I mean, I don't, without using some examples and going over this, I don't really understand it. So, I don't know what else to say particularly, except,
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Cap per property within any 24-month period. So
are they going to keep cutting down the trees every 2 years? Or I just don't understand the whole premise, I think.
doesn't make any sense. There's no, and I don't see the purpose of it. What is the purpose of putting the cap on violations? I mean, if you go out and break the speed laws every day, you're going to get a ticket every day, and there's not going to be a cap put on it. I don't understand why there would be. It doesn't make sense to me.
And I want to clarify that this is not associated with violations. This is associated with, somebody is going through the appropriate permitting process, and they are looking at, let's say, removing certain number of public trees or impacting a certain number of public trees as that property is developed. And, we've got the appraisal methods that are here in this section, and then also have looked to, again, to ensure that it would not result in being unable to develop the property overall, establishing some sort of a cap in terms of the amount that would need to be paid to the city for damaging or removing those trees, and that amount would be tied to the appraised value of the property itself. The part where the 24-month piece comes into play was, wanting to ensure that, let's say you've got a, phase one of a project that is going in, and you have to remove some trees, and you pay up to that cap amount. That, a year later, not coming in with phase two, and since you already paid up to that cap amount, that there's not necessarily any charge again. So that's where the time frame piece of it comes into play.
But then at that point, the appraised value of that property is significantly higher. So it seems to me like this is very developer friendly, but not so much urban forest canopy friendly.
Matt, is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of context for that particular section? You're on mute.
apologies.
Reason. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Matt.
Kelly, I think you covered that pretty well, is what the intention was. And then as far as the 15% of the taxable land value, that was the number suggested by by BAN and NIAP. I think the first time around a couple years ago, like Kelly brought up. I think the over 24-month period was, I think that was a new addition this time around. But I think Kelly kind of discussed where that came from pretty well. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, listen, I would rather, I mean, we're going to be talking to NAP. I would rather just have the conversation with them about what they would like to see or what their issue is, or use some examples and try to, if there is a legitimate concern, maybe they can bring that up. I mean, and I'm just going to say this, that this is a major policy thing. So if you're going to identify major policy things, whether it's from our urban forester or from the staff or from developers, I mean, this is a significant new idea. Let's call it that way. And if I'm just saying, if you're going to go highlighting major changes or substantive changes, this would be one. Okay, Kelly, just that's what I meant when I talked about consistency. This is something that doesn't exist today, that I truly am not grasping. I still am failing to grasp what it's about. I don't think it's self-explanatory, so it needs some discussion. And I would recommend not including it. And if the any group would like to propose it, then they can propose it with some examples and they can have a conversation and we can understand it. That would be my recommendation.
And I concur. I explained to Kelly earlier that I didn't understand at all what this was getting at. And if the commission itself, as individuals who are knee deep in this language, are working to to put forth a document, then we all need to have a clear understanding of what this means. And this wasn't added by us, it was added by staff, but I don't understand what it's getting at either, and whether or not the percentage is proper, too high, too low. I have no idea. I have no way to gauge it.
I mean, let's just start with the basic concept. We're talking about public trees here. And somehow we're saying, if you're going to damage public trees, this is trees in our parks, our parkway, median, something like that, that belongs to the city, somehow it's going to be devalued. And that's what I'm really struggling to understand also, is somehow you can somehow your value of your public tree is somehow tied to somebody's value of their private land. I mean, do you guys see what I'm trying to say? Is I'm really struggling with the concept. I don't understand what they're trying to get at. Are they planning to take out public trees? Is that the idea? Anticipating taking out public trees and then having to not have to pay that much as a mitigation for public trees? Is that what this concept is?
I think certainly there's an anticipation that, yes, as part of development projects, it's to be expected that at certain times public trees may need to be removed in order to develop the property. And so this whole section is new in terms of codifying those appraisal methods, and then associating with that a particular cap in terms of what would be charged.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of support for this concept at this time. Maybe at some later time with further discussion with some other groups, they could get to it, but I'm trying to think of some examples. And the only one I've thought of recently is where the people at the hub wanted to take out some trees in a park. Those are public trees. So let's say they wanted to take out those 2 trees that had a certain value, and they were doing it for their convenience. They wanted to route their stormwater system through the public park and take out the trees. How does it tie back to the value of their property? Do you see what I mean? Like I'm the nexus of it is missing. Like, I don't know what the hub property where they wanted to build the 34 apartments is worth. And I don't know how it is relevant to the value of a public tree in a park. So that's where my struggle is.
And so let me just make sure I'm understanding. Essentially, the crux of this is for comment RUFC 5. Not just the council liaison, but RUFC is recommending that this section be removed. Is that accurate?
I think that would be accurate.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and scroll down to.
Can I just comment on that really quick? As I reread it, I want to say that the original intent as proposed by NIOP and BAN was 15% of the taxable land value for the parcel itself, not public trees. I'm thinking.
I got
let me
that.
Look back. Yeah, so I'm thinking. I mean, how it reads in here, it's talking specifically about the penalty for public property trees to be removed, but
Right.
we should look back because I think I want to say that the original intent was the trees on the parcel itself. So we can.
Well, that
go
may
back and
be.
look.
I mean, that's a legitimate point, Matt. Maybe this has gotten conflated somehow. To your point, I just think it needs to be talked. And if they want to bring it forward, this is a fresh draft. And if they want to bring forward that concept and give some examples about what they're concerned about and how this could mitigate it, or a different phrasing could mitigate it, totally happy to have that conversation. I just don't think the urban forestry is putting forth this at this time.
And hey, Kelly, could I share for a second and just give an example? Council liaison brought up the one on Riverside, and I could just show how the county assessor and how that would work.
Well, I guess, Matt, I'm a little concerned about time, and I would just
Sure,
assume
okay.
drop it out
Okay.
and then talk in detail offline with the affected people and you, and find out, use some examples like you're wanting to do.
And I'm just,
Basically,
go ahead.
or go ahead, Kelly.
Go ahead, Matt. I was gonna move on to the next topic.
Okay, I was just gonna say, so I looked up that parcel that you brought up, the one on Riverside, and the taxable land value for this year was close to 300,000. The taxable land value for 22-23 on the county website was about 400,000. So I'm not sure how we would pick which year it would be, but 15% of 400,000 is about $60,000. So that would be the what I would assume would be the maximum penalty.
But I mean, it has no nexus back to what is being impacted in terms of public resources. And I know of no organization that would predetermine the value of a public resource, whether it's a curb and gutter, a street, an alleyway, a tree, a drainage system, in advance, and somehow say that these two things, it just is what it is. You know what I mean? Like,
But if I may, I think that the confusion here is this, to me, if it's a public tree, it's on public land, which really doesn't have a taxable value. So I agree with the thought of just pulling this out because there shouldn't be a cap on city-owned infrastructure.
exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. Next.
Okay. Thanks, Jamie.
So the only other one that was in here was one where we'll just incorporate the comments from the commission. So with that, there were not very many comments that were kind of out to the side on 8.32. So was there anything else from the commission on this particular title? I'm thinking if not, that perhaps we can go ahead and just take the vote quickly on this one and then move on to 18. And Chair, it looks like you said something, but I think you were on mute.
I said, sounds good.
Oh,
Okay.
let me ask a question. Matt, was this in here was where the soil was and that you said there was something you need to address?
I want to say maybe
Was
it was
that it?
15
Yeah.
as far as the new development stuff goes, but it was the language specifically was, that the soil shall conform to the soil or the city soil specification, but it was like as determined by the project engineer who stamps the project, which to me doesn't. And Kelly, I don't remember.
Can we go to that section, Kelly, and just get this fixed and also move on?
I think that was in 18.
I think it's an 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought your comments, Matt, were more in 18, not 8.
Yeah, I think we covered 8 pretty good. over the course of all our meetings.
Okay, so the only thing that I wanted to make sure in 8, and it's still standing out to me, is this use of prohibited, protected, and approved. And I want to make sure that before we send this out, those words tie to something that's meaningful. So if it's, I really don't like the word prohibited, because I don't think any trees are prohibited at this point. I understand the use of protected because we've established a definition for it. Approved implies that there's an unapproved. So I'm still struggling with it. So as long as you can have it as a bookmark, and I am happy to work through it with you offline, I think that the commission would be happy with whatever we come up with, but we just need to come up with something. Okay.
And yes, and it does refer back to what is existing out there right now in terms of naming, but yes, that's a bookmark of, that during the process. And I don't think that's something that can get worked out as we continue through the process before it comes back to urban forestry.
I just think we could work it out in the next week and then fix it. And so when it goes out, the draft, it's not confusing to people. Because if I was the people reading it, I'd say, where's the prohibited tree list? What is an approved tree list? And so on. I'd be confused. Okay.
Any other comments from anyone?
I saw Anna jumped on with a voice, but then it didn't connect. Anna, we saw you trying to connect with your phone, it looked like.
Yeah, I switched devices.
Okay, so we can hear you now.
Yep.
Yeah. Lovely to hear you, Anna.
So if there are no other changes on this, Chair, would you like to call for a vote for this particular chapter?
Yes. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve chapter 8, title 8, chapter 832 with the recommended changes and clarifications as discussed herein?
So moved.
That's by Bruce.
Yep.
Second,
I second.
Trish. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Yes, thank you. All right, so I'm going to close this out. We're going to go over to Title 18. And so again, as we talked about before, incorporating in some of those the language changes from the comments. I don't know that I had many that were pulled out for my own sake as like notes, but I'm going to go through them really quickly. I'm going to review them and scan through, and I'll stop if needed. This particular one about adding this is in the stream protection section. And the commission had recommended making sure that NDF, Nevada Division of Forestry, and that the urban forester be part of the consulting agencies. We have a separate administrative manual specific to reviewing impacts to stream, wetland environments, that kind of a thing. So that's why this is kind of set aside as a note, because it's not language here, it's language in a separate document that would need to be updated. So I just wanted to note that to the group. Let's see what else. These are all just items to be incorporated. Okay, one of the other items that I wanted to talk about with the group, one of the requests had been to change the term protected trees to preserved trees. The reason I wanted to bring this back up is that, the term protected tree was something that we had defined earlier. It was in that subsection on applicability. We also added it to the zoning code definitions. And my request was that we let that term remain as is for consistency. Part of that is because, we're talking about a tree protection ordinance. We're talking about a section on tree protection. We are, have defined these categories of trees are considered protected trees. If it is a protected tree, it is subject to certain requirements in terms of mitigation and protection, or, you know, those types of, all those mitigation requirements that we have in the code. And so in my view, one of my concerns is that if we changed it to preserved trees, that it may suggest that the trees are being preserved when in fact, you know, sometimes they're actually being removed. And so that was my request, was for us to be able to actually just leave that term as protected trees. And I'm just going back now to that section in the applicability where, you know, we talk about under what circumstances trees are considered protected, and then we define that here as well as in our definition section. Is that something that the group would be comfortable with?
So Kelly, one thing, could you increase the size again a little bit more? And the second thing is just the title here where you are right now, it's called tree preservation. And I think that's why the group went to this tree preserve trees. You know, it was confusing. Maybe the title should be changed to protected trees if you want to keep the name. So,
Well, it's two different things though.
okay.
This particular section is if you preserve a tree, this is the credit that you will get for preserving it. That's what this particular section is.
So Kelly's right in that protected trees can potentially be removed under certain criteria, certain reasons, certain permissions. But this is specifically talking to trees that will be preserved, but they are protected trees. So I think that makes sense, especially since you've got a definition that you're linking back to. That we may not have a definition in there for preserved trees. I think Kelly's right on this one in that to be consistent and to have the same definition for the trees. A protected tree can be either a preserved tree or it can be a permitted tree for removal. But I think it does make sense to keep the definition consistent throughout.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. And so, and that is something that it kind of filters through the rest of the document. So that's why I wanted to mention it. Let's see, these other sections, we'll just incorporate that text.
Can we go back to, I'm sorry, commented RUFC 4? Have you gone past that already?
Yes, let me go back up there.
Thought you did. Should be under exemptions.
Yes,
The
it's
bottom of the page, right there. Yeah, you have RUFC recommends eliminating this exemption.
Correct.
But this, I don't see that it's kind of, this was a staff addition for B, subsection B, you added it. And so you would then just show this as a strike through in the document that gets released, correct?
Yes, I think that's how that would wind up, that would wind up occurring.
Okay.
And then,
I'm just
yeah.
clear. Yes, because this was something staff added, and this is something that the Urban Forestry Commission did not agree with.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that's how it will be presented.
Or it could just be deleted, Kelly, with, you know, that it's not incorporated into. I mean, you guys have to just think anything that's red that's subsequently deleted, should it just be deleted because it never was added? Or do you want to, if you do want to go through the process of adding it and then showing it deleted in different colors or something, you know, you guys talk about that. What is the best way? You could simply not add it.
Right, because we didn't agree with it.
Yeah, it could either be struck through and or it could be clarified in the, you know, the comment section. I think those are a couple different ways of dealing with it. If there is a particular preference by the group, please let me know now. Otherwise, we'll just determine, you know, internally of how that will work, how it will be formatted.
Well, let's hear from the group. Since it was universal that we wanted it removed.
I would say just remove it, just delete it.
Yeah, I agree to just remove it, delete it, not have it in the final.
Anybody else wish to comment on the commission?
I agree with just removing it as well.
Thank you, Sonia.
Sorry, I'm just taking notes on.
Okay, Kelly.
here. Okay. So I'm gonna scroll down to the next one.
There
that I-
was,
Go
there
ahead.
was another one, Kelly, right, you just went right past it, which was RUFC 5
Yep, right.
that I thought maybe would probably want to handle the same way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are you talking about subsection C2?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I was gonna say the same. Thank you. And then in response to a comment from Mr. Chappelle earlier, I had spoken with Kelly and Jamie this afternoon and felt that the recommendation of changing the threshold to 2 inches was in fact too small, in my opinion, and I'm the one that made it originally. So in thinking about it, I thought that should be increased to 4 inches. And so I wanted to bring that up for the benefit of the commission.
And where are we, Cynthia? Which number here?
We're in subsection G, where it says trees on the city's prohibited tree species list less than 6 inches DBH.
Yeah.
And I had thought to myself, actually, that 2 is too small, that it
Yeah.
should probably be 4.
I think I thought so at the time that you brought it up, actually.
Yep, yeah. So I mentioned that to Kelly earlier.
I'm sorry, I know you had talked a bit about the prohibited tree species list. So is there going to be a comment about that on here as well?
I mean, I assume, Kelly, you're gonna do a search and find and combine here on these words.
Yes, when a new name is identified, yes, then we would replace that through there. I mean, we could potentially identify with a note on the side that this name is going to change throughout. That would create several notes.
I
we
just
could do
think
it that
let's
way, but-
figure it out here pretty soon. We could put our brains to it and.
All right, the other ones that are on this page, we had talked about, or they will just be incorporated in. So I'm going to continue to scroll through.
This 9 was an area, RUFC 9 as well, removing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it should just be deleted, not a comment. Is that what you're saying,
Right.
Nathan?
Yes.
And so, okay, so these are the kinds of policy changes, though, when it comes to changes from that original draft, significant changes and, the proposal. I think that is where we will, when we remove that from the text, that there will likely be some additional information added to the comment in terms of the prior to reflecting what that change is. From Urban Forestry Commission. And that is something that, again, it helps to identify or, be a little bit more transparent about some of those changes. But then it also, I think that the benefit there also is that it opens it up in terms of options for people to consider of what other potential, methods may be. It would help to spur some of that language. But I think the bigger part is that it keeps that transparency there in terms of
Where did it
some
come
of the
from, Kelly?
changes and recommendations.
Where did this come from originally?
The I mean, everything that you see that's in red text, those are staff changes.
Okay, but where did the staff get the idea to put this in there?
That particular one about excluding the area under the footprint from staff discussions in terms of, you know, just, I would say similar to many of the ways that, you know, code amendments are created when you start looking at, okay, what's the issue that needs to be addressed? What are the mitigation factors that we need to include? What problem are we trying to solve? What are the different impacts? You know, and as part of those conversations, a lot of times you're going to see various types of proposals in the text. Certainly a lot of the text that was in here also came from that prior draft that was floated to Urban Forestry Commission and to the public back in late 2019 and 2020. So,
Okay, Kelly, that's
remember
just
this.
a misunderstanding, I think, because
Yep,
I
totally.
never saw the draft. I don't think anyone in Urban Forestry ever saw that draft. That Matt did and Claudia did. It was just an internal staff draft. There was never any discussion here about
So-
this.
Right. This was definitely a concept that it was new in this draft. It wasn't something that we had an opportunity to comment on. And it sounds to me like it was something that was taken from the public or stakeholders and put into here outside of the Urban Forestry Commission. Because this is in direct conflict in principle and concept to what we're trying to do as the Urban Forestry Commission and as the body that has recommended that the tree ordinance be revised.
certainly, and I do think that it's important that the comments that you have, that the decisions that you make as part of this process, as part of this review, that is included and that is reflected in, you know, what we put forth to the public and to the other deciding bodies.
So I think I'm gonna rephrase maybe what Cynthia said. This is kind of an anathema. This is like the opposite of what the Urban Forestry Commission was trying to do when they wanted to protect more trees, not less. This actually says, no, if you happen to be in a footprint of where somebody's decided to put a building or within 5 feet of that, or within 5 feet of a proposed structure, that those trees don't count. And that is the complete opposite. And that's
Right.
where that's why it was voted upon on a roll call vote to strike it, because it's at complete odds. So if you want to, in a presentation somewhere, say an alternate concept is to exclude the area under a tree, or you want a third party, a stakeholder, a review group to make that recommendation, they certainly can. But to have it incorporated in a draft or even argued for by you, I think that's where things are kind of falling apart, because
Right.
it's so opposite of what the goal here is.
Right.
So maybe you can think of something, you know, a way to kind of bring these into
Alignment.
alignment. Okay.
And
We
if the
had
commission's
a
comfortable, then-
lengthy discussion on this exact line in the last meeting. And it was voted on. We all agreed we wanted it out of there. This is not part of the existing code. This does not have to exist anywhere. I think that, you know, I'm pretty adamant that needs to go away. That does not need to be anywhere in the document, period.
Amy, you were about to say something.
Based on what Councilmember Dorr said, if you're comfortable, then yeah, staff will figure it out. We hear the commission loud and clear.
Were there other comments on this before we move on to the next section?
Processing, I think what Jamie said, that you would figure it out. So I want everybody to be able to vote on this and feel good about it. You can always present, when you present to any particular body, you can say alternative ideas have been discussed. You know, if that's a way to do it, you know.
I think that's probably the route we'll take.
I mean, because I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not going to vote for that language remaining in the document and moving it forward to the public for review.
Yeah, so I think, Jamie, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, we'll just strike it through and then know that that will likely just be a topic of discussion later.
I think the same is true for that 1 to 0.05 ratio for me personally.
I
think
agree.
we all universally agreed it was a 1-to-1 tree ratio.
Correct. Yes, and that's what we had talked about earlier, Chair, with updating that following section as well.
Okay, so it's going to read a 1-to-1. And above in
Correct.
1, where it says the replacement is 1 to 0.05. The replacement is 1-to-1.
Yes, that's how it would be. Yes, this
But,
0.5
I mean,
would change to 1,
right.
and then this example would be updated
Okay.
to be accurate in reflecting that.
Okay. I mean, because these, again, these are not, this is staff language that we, the commission, don't agree with. Universally, the commission doesn't agree with. And so we don't want to be off to the side. We want it to be in the body.
Right.
This is
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
all
she
of the,
said that. She
yeah.
said
All of the changes that we've been talking about, where it's got the comments in here from the chair, that
Mhm.
we're talking about incorporating that into the body of the language.
Okay.
And so just to clarify, you said if you could go back up there. So the language will be changed for the minimum 1-1 caliper ratio. And then in the next sentence, it would require replacement with 2 3-inch caliper trees or the equivalent, instead of just saying 1 3-inch caliper tree.
Sure. Yeah. Either this could be changed or this particular language could be changed. So yeah, just so it aligns.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And similar, just like all of the other comments in here, where we've talked about incorporating those comments into the body section. Same with these. This was another staff note. This is just a reiteration of what we talked about before with the protected trees versus other phrases for it.
Want to make sure though on that one, Kelly, if that really was it, or I saw the use of the word existing there. Be changed to existing tree. I think this one is different, so I just want to make sure. It says
reread this. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you for pausing on that. So that is, yes, adding the existing. Existing is what was added by Urban Forestry Commission. And yes, that had originally been, the request was to change protected trees to existing trees. And for clarification, was leaving it as adding existing, but having the phrases existing protected trees, since that's what we had determined in that, the first page essentially of what's applicable or not when we're talking about protected trees. So it's not necessarily just all trees across the site, it's the ones that have been identified as being protected trees based on the information we had in the applicability section.
So can you just refresh us? I mean, protected trees in this instance, are they trees of a certain size? I mean, I'm a little unclear.
I'm going to go back up to this section on applicability. So it's any of the trees that fall into any of these categories that we have defined here.
Public or private?
And where we say, this section applies to existing and newly planted trees meeting the criteria identified below. But the standards within this section, being the tree protection section, are applicable to protected trees.
Okay, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. And if later, I mean, I guess what once we get a full read with everything incorporated, it may make sense, may be perfect. And then if it doesn't, I guess I'm just going to challenge the commission and make sure that it says what you think it says. And if you yourselves find an inconsistency later, because this is big, you know, I mean, a lot to read and a lot to read in context, then we'll all agree, just like we agreed with Kelly to change some things already. We just want to make sure it says the right stuff. Okay. I think that was 11. You were at our UFC 11. I think, or 12. Let's track here. Here it is, 14.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Let's see, next section, it's under some of the procedures for how to protect a tree. We talk about prohibited activities adjacent to trees. More comments that will get incorporated. More comments to be incorporated.
So Kelly, this, if you go back up, that was one comment we spoke of earlier. Shade, canopy, canopy shade. I wasn't quite clear in my mind what the
section right
commission
here.
decided last week or 2 weeks ago, actually, because I
I
wasn't. in
thought
the
they
right mind
decided
when I
on
did it.
shade. So
I thought so too. I thought we flipped back to shade. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because it still reflects canopy in lieu of shade.
is that correct, Matt and everyone?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a lot of instances, then you'll see it just revert back to the original adopted language.
Sounds good. Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware
Yes, thank you.
of that.
Okay. And that's throughout the section.
Can we go back to wide parkways? I think that might be a little bit ill-defined. Council recommends updating this to wide parkways. So I just want to make it clear what we're talking about. Is it something wider than 5 feet? You know, wide itself is still an ambiguous term. And I thought we were going to talk about these kinds of comments, Kelly, that are off to the side that are.
So let me make sure I understand. Is a parkway the strip along the street, or is it the median, or is it something else?
It's generally going to be along the streets between the curb line.
Okay.
Yeah, from the curb line back.
Is there a defined width that makes it a parkway versus a parking strip? Or, I mean, I don't know if there's a technical.
I think the definition is the strip of land between the curb and the sidewalk is a parkway.
Correct.
And I think the intent was that to establish a minimum width, because they've over time have gotten narrower and narrower.
Yeah, they did get narrower.
So what is that width? Is there some standard?
So
I think the minimum is 5 feet.
Well,
isn't
it? So yes, I believe that's the minimum, and then it varies. There's a number of variables that come into play. Part of it is based on the zoning district and you know, what's feasible or not, and we've got all sorts of standards in place in terms of, you know, what needs to go in a parkway, and you know, in addition to just saying like the trees that need to go there, but everything else, the standards associated with that. So it's not like a hard and fast just 5 feet. It's wider in some instances. And my understanding is, go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. I was going to say, you know, in that vein, Kelly, and back to subsection B, and under the purpose where we have specifically identified Reimagine Reno, the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, I think what we probably want to clarify there with the term wide parkways, we probably want to put wider parkways and parentheses greater than 5 feet, because the whole idea is that we are improving the streetscape environment by providing street tree plantings, wider parkways, parentheses, greater than 5 feet, and other landscaping and new development, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wasn't comfortable with the term, the RUFC wants wide parkways. I think we need to be a bit more specific and say we want wider parkways and greater than 5 feet. And that way we're leaving it open, but we're making it clear in this particular article in response to these documents that the city of Reno has developed and adopted, that we are looking for wider parkways in order to promote a tree canopy and a better improved streetscape environment.
That makes some kind of sense. I think what you're really saying is it's a minimum. So I like
Yes.
how you phrased it though. I mean, it leaves a lot of flexibility for the developers.
Yes, yes.
This is one of those things where, you know, I'm kind of hoping to see some specific requirements. So whether that's greater than 5 feet in width, or to me, it's more of providing the adequate soil volume, which can be addressed, you know, further in the chapter. But because, like, for example, you could do silva cells under the sidewalk, or Cynthia and I worked on a project where they did structural soil under the sidewalk to encourage, you know, to allow that soil volume to be included under the sidewalk itself. Yeah, to be expanded. So, so I think I'm okay with the language here, because we can address that, the specificity of that later on.
Yes.
Further in detail later in the chapter.
Right.
Well, and I think if I'm understanding this correctly, this is more pointed towards newer development areas where if we can get in there when the design is happening and design for wider parkways, you know, you see a lot of them like out on Double R and some of those areas where they have nice wide parkways. They're beautiful places to plant trees and they're getting them in there. So it's probably good to kind of put that out there that, you know, we want wider parkways greater than 5 feet, like as Cynthia says, but at least put that notion in there that the wider the parkway, the better.
So can we just make this change and move on? Is there a lot of objection, or does that meet the need, Matt, here right now in this section? We can address other things later.
I think so. I think, you know, maybe we need to look into the specific requirements based on different zoning, like Kelly brought up, and cover that. Like, you know, for example, maybe an infill, a minimum of 5 feet, and then in new developments, maybe a minimum of 8 feet. So I think maybe Kelly and I can talk about that internally and look at what the requirements are based on zoning.
Well, could we just start right now with this right here, right now? And if you want to change it, you know, could we at least nail this part down? And then if you want to make it something more elaborate later, as we go through the review drafts, you could. We,
Kelly, do you want to bring that up? And then Mark commented that the Public Works Design Manual will have an updated section on that. So Kelly, I don't know if you have any additional comments to that.
I was just going to say, for this particular section, the purpose section, it's often what you'll see the purpose section of the code being is like more aspirational, not aspirational, but it's, you know, it's more of, we want it to be like this. And this is why we're putting these standards into place, and then the standards follow, right? Like it's not necessarily where you're going to see the specifics about measurements and that kind of thing. You'll see that further down.
Well, how about the word wider then? That gets a aspirational general concept in a direction.
Sure.
Yep.
All right.
That's what we were looking for under this section.
So I'm just going through the comments that we will incorporate. Scrolling through quickly, being aware of time.
Here's the shade thing again. Did you see that?
This was a change from that request from the commission to change the word street tree to shade trees.
So you might go back earlier in the draft where it's talking about canopy and change and keep that word shade back in there.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm just scrolling down to the next.
Kelly and I talked about that earlier. Street will be shade.
Hey, Kelly, did we update the, as far as ground cover, the, the maximum
Mulch?
inert materials?
Oh, yeah, that was updated to say at installation. You're talking about the 15% for inert,
Yes.
is that right? Yes. I don't remember the exact place, but yes, it was added with that language that you had requested about the at installation. And then that mulch section with the
Minimum 5 feet.
requirement for the mulch of a certain diameter around trees and shrubs. That was
One thing
another-
that I noticed, Kelly, in that mulch section is that we didn't specify the thickness of the mulch. And
I think it
that's
was 4
just as
inches.
important as the distance.
I thought I just saw 4 inches, but it went by
thinking
2.
that's-
I think it's
Oh, there it is.
Right
There it is.
below.
The minimum of 4 inches right
Yeah.
there. Okay, apologies. Thank you, Naomi.
Okay, and I don't know if we actually have any more comments that are in here. And we can scroll back up, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, that was through the rest of the comments. Okay,
Okay,
so
Kelly, I
again,
have
those will get
some-
incorporated.
I have some comments that weren't in the bullets or in the boxes. Can we go back to the beginning?
Do you have a section number?
Yep. Just go right back to the very beginning and it's right at the top. You start with purpose, map, A, B, C. Okay, when you get to D, applicability, you got B. It's big D, like little d, but I think you just,
Oh, sorry. Okay, so under applicability, and then is it this one? What was the,
no. Okay, let's go to the very top. Maybe we can find ourselves. Go all the way to the top. So we have A, purpose, right?
and are we
There you
in
go.
section 1804, 103?
Yep, yep.
Okay, okay.
A, purpose, B, mapped resources, C, administrative manual, then D,
Yes,
applicability and exemptions.
yes.
So where I was confused was under 2, exemptions. So it says, here's what's exempt, and this is from this section, which is the wetlands. It says projects previously approved, permit applications that have been approved prior to effective date. My question was, what kind? Like permits, projects previously approved, I mean, there's every level of permit, right? There could be a grading permit, there could be a time to map, there could be a PUD, SPD. And some of them, like if it's a PUD, they still have to get their tentative map. And my understanding is this would apply. So well, first of all, was all of this language, none of it's read, but was it all
Correct.
in here?
It's currently adopted language. Yes.
Okay. So what do you think they're talking about? Is exempted are projects permit previously approved, permit
So-
applications?
Yeah, and for that, I would go back up to the prior section
Okay,
where we talk about what permits are included, building permits, grading permits, drainage plans, subdivision, parcel maps, applications, master plan amendments, zoning map amendments, site plan review, major site plan
Okay.
review, CUPs.
so, all right, so those are the permits we're speaking of. Before you go further, this no over covering of additional land, I didn't even know what it was. Like, development projects or permit applications that do not involve over covering of additional land areas. So what does this mean? I've just never heard this term and I was really confused.
I think, Naomi, this is kind of like what we have up in the basin where they have coverage allowances. So on a set of land, and I know this is apples to oranges, but your coverage is your driveways, your hardscape, your structures, anything that you're covering the land so it is a non-permeable surface. And up there, it's become a commodity because it can be traded and swapped around. But here we're saying, as long as you're not adding any additional coverage to the land, then that is exempt from.
They
that's
mean
the-
like impervious surface, do you think, Kelly? Like it says signs, like an example of something that I assume isn't an overcoverage is signs, interior remodel, right? A master plan amendment, you haven't added any hardscape. Is that what they're getting at?
I would say that it's any development of, if you're talking about covering additional land, like you said, with coverage, you're going to create additional, you're going to cover additional land. So yeah, something like a sign that's going on the side of a building, you're not going to, cover any additional land with
Right.
that. If it's an interior remodel or if it's a master
Okay,
plan
as
amendment, yeah.
long as everybody knows what it is, I never had heard this term. So I've heard impervious surface, I've heard land clearing, grading, involvement, land disturbance, maybe as a term.
Sure.
And maybe it should say land disturbance. That does not involve land disturbance. Additional land disturbance. Maybe that's the right word. I don't
So, you know what, if I could just bring up one thing about this that I didn't catch earlier. So for like an interior remodel, for example, some cities will still require a tree preservation permit because even though you're not working on the outside land, there's still the transport of materials and work, trucks are being parked and stuff like that. So some cities do require tree preservation fences and things like that on the private parcel during a building, whenever there's a building permit.
Okay. So what's your thought, Matt?
I think Kelly and I need to look at that a little bit more in depth, as far as the exception from a permit.
And I want to make sure it's clear to you, this particular section, I mean, we're,
It's for wetlands, right?
correct. Yeah. For wetlands and stream environments. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's that whole separate, 30 or 40 page administrative manual.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay, I'll move on. I just hadn't seen it before. We never talked about it. My next one was about the applicability. This is section 1804-105, tree protection.
Okay.
And we talked about the definition of terms. And one thing I thought we could add here for more clarity, and you tell me if we don't need it, where it says private trees. It says this section's standards, it looks like this section applies to all non-residential, mixed use and multifamily residential developments. Does non-residential in the planning world include industrial and commercial? Do we have to spell that out or is it assumed?
That would be, so in our current zoning code, yes, non-residential would include industrial, commercial, mixed use would include commercial.
Okay. Okay. So in this next section is my most confusing part, and it is right below this part. It's part of the same section. It says the standards apply to all activity, including construction, grading, land disturbance, linear infrastructure, sidewalks, roadways, or other that may adversely impact existing. I'm not sure where we go here. Existing on-site private trees, the 2 inches we fixed, right?
Yes.
Right, we're changing that 2 inches, or is it still the, this is the wrong 2 inches, I'm sorry.
It would be the 6 inches to 4 inches.
Well, it says that might affect private trees 2 inches in diameter, breast height or greater. And then it says 6 inches DBH or greater for trees on the city's prohibited tree speed. I don't know. Just the way it was all worded, I really did not know what we were doing, frankly. So,
if I could, one thing that since we've gone over this, that's kind of come up in the day-to-day here is border trees, I would call them. So private trees that are not on the parcel where the building permit is, where the construction is taking place, but on adjacent parcels. So I think we do need to add a little language about trees that are on other parcels that are affected by work being done on another parcel.
okay, so there's trees on site and trees off, private trees on site, private trees off site, right?
Right. Right. Like there's one project right now where they're putting in a sewer line from one development to the street, and the sewer line is going to disrupt the tree on the adjacent parcel. So I think we just need to add a little language to that.
Is there a suggestion though, Matt? Are you still thinking about it?
I think we need to refine exactly where that would go. I think it should go here. Another city I looked at, I think it was, if more than 20% of the drip line of the tree, of a border tree is impacted, then it is covered under this chapter.
Okay, so this is applicability, so that's why I wanted to come back to it, because it's where does the whole darn thing apply, right? Everything we've been talking about. And I was still kind of confused. So before we go, and Kelly, maybe you need a sub I 1 and 2 that says on-site and off-site. I don't know. I don't know if I'm prepared to address the on and off-site in detail right now, but let's just stick to the on-site for the moment. What were we trying to say here? On-site private trees 2 inches in diameter at breast height or greater, but then why does it say 6 inches or greater? I was very confused.
Those are the non-desirable trees. If they're bigger than 6 inches, they want to protect them.
Okay, so if it's a cottonwood, is this what we're talking about?
Yeah, and I don't know how often that comes into play or why.
The reason we included that is, so under the current code that was adopted in January, an inventory of all the existing trees on a parcel is required.
Right.
And what we're finding is that there could be 1,000 volunteer little elm trees,
Okay.
like little suckers and stuff. So by saying that we're only going to count one 6 inches or greater, we're taking off of that kind of unnecessary burden of accounting.
Okay, how about this? Maybe you could put comma after 2 inches in diameter at breast height, comma, or for trees on the cities, and then fill in the blank, prohibited tree house or less desirable tree list, 6 inches. Is that what it is? In other words, somehow this has to just be set off with paragraph, colon, semicolons, colons, 2 separate sentences, something. Could you do that, Kelly?
Yes.
Do you
So
see what
same
I'm saying?
intent, just clarifying the language.
Yeah.
Thing.
I didn't want to change it. I just got really confused when I reread it.
You don't
I
want
think-
a run-on sentence there? Goes on forever and ever, like much of our governmentese.
Okay, but maybe if just the comma, that will help. And then maybe a rewording of the second phrase, that would help. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have for this section, for this time. I just wanted to bring those couple things up and that weren't in boxes.
Gotcha.
I had something just on the next page there. So if you want to just start at the top, so you know the section we're working on. Sorry, scroll back up to the bottom of the previous page. So this next one for exemption, it's part of the same one, the exemptions.
Okay.
Yep, so exemption C, the one, it doesn't apply to the individual singly or duplex homes, and then you scroll down. And what's the next exemption, number 2? Oh no, sorry, C, which is also included the vegetation thinning as part of the defensible space. And then under C, it goes into the wildland urban interface WUI areas. And then we talk about getting rid of number 2 and then clarifying number 3. I just wanted to revisit C1 there because that was brought up by a public comment 2 meetings ago, I think it was. And, that's kind of a very loose definition. I think it could be interpreted a lot of different ways. If we want to clarify it a little more, maybe just say in the wildland urban interface and cross off areas. Just because there's not really, I don't think there's a clear definition of WUI areas. Like the WUI is a very distinct part where
right.
the native vegetation meets the developed vegetation. That's that interface, but an area could be a pretty large area.
Right. That's a good point, Anna. It should be in the WUI,
Okay.
no area.
Were there others, Commissioner Higgins? Or just that one?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
Well, under prohibited activities adjacent to trees, which is just down from this, I think.
Oh, you passed it.
Did I pass it?
I
Thank
think
you.
so. Right there.
It's actually right after the,
Oh,
there was a tree picture, I think, coming. There it is. And right below, it's prohibited activities adjacent to trees. I was just confused under vehicular traffic, so the next page. Maybe we addressed this already. Oh, we're gonna remove this highlight, or you'll just delete it in this text, Kelly, since it's in black.
Yes, it's the full last sentence that would get straight
Yeah.
through.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, very good.
Wait, I thought we were removing grade changes altogether.
But we have to,
That's
it's
our
black.
recommendation, Matt, but because it was there as part of the original language, Kelly Hopper
Right.
showed us struck through.
Right,
Okay.
So grade change in this section, it was a duplicate and it was removed. And then
okay.
on the other one, the discussion was that if it was no grade changes unless it was part of an approved tree protection plan and utilize
Right, I remember
construction
this.
methods approved by the urban forester.
Hey, Kelly, before we move on, just above that, I thought, weren't we gonna define the critical root zone of a tree?
We have that. That's defined up here. And then that was added, the last sentence or last
Okay.
part of the sentence was
Thank you.
added.
and since it's in black, it was already there, is what you're saying.
It was one of the definitions, yeah. So it was just modified.
But I mean, it was already existing before we started.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Councilmember, were there others? Was that it?
Me?
Mhm.
Let me see. Sorry, lost my thread. We talked about parkways. I mean, we've covered a number that I had, so I just wanted to go back to the ones that, no, I think we got them.
Okay, so let's look at where the soil volume conversation is in here. Since we're scrolling back and forth, let's talk about those sections that we've
There's
added.
a soil volume piece that is in parking lots. Let me find that. And that was one of the items that a lot of those specific standards, there'd been a technical advisory committee as part of the zoning code update. It was like a subcommittee specifically for landscaping standards, and I got some more information in terms of the process and the makeup of that group. It was full of landscape architects that I think they had various focuses: residential, commercial, public, some sustainability, or they had met several times to go through the standards and then vetted that, came to agreement as part of that public process. And then we had a couple of landscape architects also that were on the overall committee for the zoning code. So I just want to put that out there. I know that we had talked last week, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago, about updating some of those. So I just want to make that clear in terms of the process that they went through as part of the zoning code that was adopted in January of this year, of how they got to some of those standards and the process that was used for that.
Okay,
I'm gonna
so
find
let me
that
make
section.
sure I understand what you're saying, Kelly. So what you're saying is as part of the zoning code ordinance that's been going on or underway or maybe already completed, a bunch of landscape architects and other professionals got together and made some comments and changes and things like that, which is great. But now let's talk about this tree ordinance, specifically in this section where we're going to be promoting with an educational campaign and getting all the contractors on board to understand what the expectations are after it's been through the public adoption process, whatever those recommendations come to be. It's only helpful if we go out and we educate everybody on what's included in this document specifically, since this is about our urban tree canopy. So where in this document is this it? Number subsection 5, soil prep?
This is where you'll find, yes, the soil information about in parking lot island specifically.
Okay, so. Okay, and so Matt, the city's standard details for public works reflect the volume that we're supposed to have or not? This seems like it's a small area. Am I incorrect here?
It is, and that's,
Okay, so let's stay here for a second.
so this was one of my concerns is that I was excluded from that process of updating the soil, the parking
Soil
lot.
volume. Mhm.
The current, so as this describes the current language, my calculation is about 336 cubic feet, where
Right.
which is different from what we've agreed on already with the minimum volume for a class 4 tree of being 600 cubic feet of soil. So I think that's a big
Right.
difference that we need to broach. The 600 cubic feet of soil is only 50% of what's recommended, in the literature and by professionals and the generally accepted in the industry. So to me, I think it really should be, we should focus on the available soil volume more so
Right.
than the area. And I think it should be a minimum of 600 cubic feet, whether that's in a soil cell or an island.
Under the pavement or whatever.
Right,
I
it
mean, if
doesn't-
this has to do with a parking lot, or parking island, and we've all seen trees and parking islands all over the city that look just like they were planted, in 1977. So this is one thing, this is one area, Kelly, where I think I know Bruce, Anna, myself, others would all agree that soil volume is how we want to reflect the language to promote a healthy tree canopy, particularly in parking lots. And when I read a minimum 3-foot usable soil depth, I mean, that just sounds like
Well, just to cut to the chase, can we just change this with a minimum 600 cubic feet soil volume?
Yes.
And just be done with it?
Yep.
And just to acknowledge, Bruce typed here in the chat, he does have to get off at 8.
Okay.
And yes, if there's, in terms of the chat, if anybody else has been putting stuff in the chat, when I'm presenting, I can't see that. So just so you know, in case there's anything important that put in there. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and then before we move on, just this was the thing that where it says the determinations of soil suitability shall be made and verified by the landscape architect or responsible party. I think that leaves it up to, I think that makes it too ambiguous to where there's no city. Basically, you're implying that the city's not going to check it. So I think that there should be something to say that, urban forester or someone from the city will inspect that or has the opportunity to inspect it.
Agree.
Now we do have a section, I just want to be clear, we do have a section earlier when it comes to just, landscape plans in general and landscaping requirements about inspections and needing to install according to plan and all of that. So from my perspective, it's something that I think is probably covered by those previous sections related to inspections certainly if you wish to add that in, then that can be.
I recommend that we add it in. If we're gonna mention anybody here, Kelly, then we should add the urban forester here too. I mean, even though it's covered in other sections, this specifically says it needs to be verified by the landscape architect or other responsible party, which Matt is right. It's a little bit vague. Landscape architect may not have, you know, all the tools at hand in order to determine the soil suitability.
So let's just add them in. I'm on a very practical, get it done kind of basis here.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think the intent was to exclude him. So let's just make sure he's included and
It goes without saying, making sure it's urban forester and their designee. That way, if Matt
Exactly.
can't make it, he can send one of his crew.
of course.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Or if we are to hire a, some
Right.
sort of landscape inspector person in the future.
Support.
Right.
Right.
Let me ask
Okay.
if we're going to lose quorum when Bruce jumps off. Excuse me, when Commissioner Barr jumps off.
I don't think so. Okay,
Okay.
where else do we talk about soil prep, Kelly?
I think you're
Since
good.
it's only a,
We're good. We'll still
Good.
keep quorum for 5. So thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you.
Bruce. Where else do we talk about soil prep, Kelly?
Um,
Or do we talk about it?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. We reference the standard details in many places whenever we're talking about street trees.
Okay.
But I think what we did was we're referencing the standard details, which are, part of the public works design manual.
Hey, sorry guys, I didn't realize Sonia dropped off. We didn't.
You know what? Sonia texted me, her internet went out and she's
On the phone?
restarting her Wi-Fi right now.
Okay. Does anybody
we
need
need-
to use a restroom break right now then while Sonia's trying to get back on? Okay. Just don't take any formal action. You can't really make a decision yet until she jumps back on.
Okay, thank you. So
Soil
I
is.
just want to make, yeah, I just want to
Bring
make
it
sure,
up.
Matt, that we've got it covered in the most appropriate places.
Yes.
Because it's one of the
I'm
most
looking at the
important
document.
elements.
It is brought up in the tree wells, which is important. I'd like to see it more of a included somewhere, in general, more so than just specifically parking lot islands. And
I would agree.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point myself. Is there a section, that talks about soil volume somewhere here,
I'm
Kelly?
going to make this small just so I can scroll faster. So
Yeah,
please,
sure.
Councilmember Stewart, forgive me.
Absolutely. Totally understand.
Thinking it might be under our landscaping standards.
Sonia, thank you for rejoining. You're critical to the quorum.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why my internet just randomly went out.
So we have in our landscaping standards section on trees, size standard, tree mix, tree well plantings, where we talk about the soils, tree plantings and sidewalks and plazas, drainage, soil type, planting conditions. See if there's anything else. I think that would be that more general place. If you're talking about something that's just like across landscaping standards, as opposed to specific locations where those trees are planted.
Yeah, so is this it?
So it talks about the size standard. Yes, I think this would be the place where you would generally see about trees that are being planted across the site when it's not in a specific location, where some of those just general requirements are. This one is specific to sidewalks and plazas, and it talks about the size of the planting hole, and it talks about the landscaping areas, minimum size in terms of length and width, tree well size, talks about natural soils. Let's see, we've got excavation.
we
Yeah, so
add a
this is
section
soil
here,
volume in
Kelly?
here.
Yeah, Kelly, I think we just need to add after
Oh, here we
other
go.
landscape materials.
I think we
Is
just
there
need to
another
add a
section?
subsection.
And I was just going to highlight this section here where it talks about soil shall meet soil quality and volume requirements in the standard details.
What do you think about that, Matt? Is this a good enough right here?
Can you scroll up a little bit there, Kelly? Yeah, okay, so that's what I was looking at as well. It's good. I mean, I personally, I'd like to see it applied for all landscaping, but I guess I would accept it in this context.
So Mark is saying that it's in the it's in the water conservation section, which also seems odd.
Right, I think it belongs
you.
right up there
Oh,
under
okay.
tree mix. A subsection.
I guess what's
Exactly.
weird is it's parts and pieces in a lot of sections. It just needs its own section.
I
Is
agree.
the problem.
I thought
So
we
Kelly-
talked about this several times.
We did. So wherever I think we
Well-
keep finding it here in a parking lot and finding it there by a sidewalk. And I think it's just, it needs to be a generally applicable thing like irrigation is. And maybe that's a place for it.
So maybe-
And go ahead,
Maybe like just a separate section,
under trees,
soil.
right? So let's see. So like taking this language
Right,
and moving that into a new subsection D
right.
for soil.
For soil volume,
Well done.
yes. Can I also bring up, I think we talked about in parking lots and in street tree areas, certainly in parking lots for sure, requiring, a level 4 canopy tree. And I don't see any language about that discussion in here either.
I'm gonna finish typing this note and then I'm gonna move back up to that section.
Thank you. You tell me when you're ready.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna make this small again so I can move faster. Hope I'm going in the right direction. There we go. You were talking about the in the parking lot trees, and we had added that sentence. It already had a requirement for class 4 large canopy type trees, and then based on that discussion 2 weeks ago, this section was updated for a minimum of 75% of the trees in the parking lots to be class 4, and then
Okay.
this piece was struck.
Okay, great.
What about
So
for
this
street
isn't a,
trees?
right, what can we make sure
I'm sorry, I
that's
didn't
in
hear that.
the reference to street trees too?
Kelly, would you mind enlarging a little bit, please?
Okay, I will do that. I'm just going to scroll to where we have street trees. Okay, and then we also have in the details, the standard details. That's where, I mean, you'll find a ton of information about the requirements for street trees.
Yeah,
But
I think it deserves a mention here though.
we've got the trees shall be installed per the standard details for public works.
Yeah, but that doesn't mention
And-
class 4 canopy. The standard details are the proper planting. It doesn't specify the species, or excuse me, the size. And we've developed a list of trees and classified them. And we all agreed and discussed that in our streetscapes and in our parking lots, we want class 4 canopy trees. And I'm not seeing that here.
And then let me just, Matt, ask you, we do not have that listed in the standard details on the requirements for, I mean, I know that we have information about like location specific of if it's under a power line or if it's, you know, in certain locations, then you need to use these types of trees as opposed to the larger ones. Do we not have requirements in there other than that for sizing?
So the approved species list basically categorizes all of the different types of trees and in locations where they're appropriate, but it doesn't require the planting of certain size trees and
Or certain classes of trees in specific areas.
so what we had discussed, so like under
Here we go.
or 804,
Mm-hmm.
is that where we're at on here?
Yes, I was noticing the comment over here, which is one of the ones that would be incorporated in of updating the residential street tree requirements to specifically call for canopy type street trees. That was a comment last time, but it sounds like that comment is being updated to say
Class 4.
Class 4.
And I mean, I think it'd be nice to say something like 75% or a minimum of 75% of the trees shall be class 3 or 4, something along those lines, as opposed to just saying we're prioritizing canopy 4, or that we prefer large canopy. Personally, I would like to see a requirement for at least a minimum percentage of the required trees to be of the larger canopy type.
I like that, Matt. Thank you.
So when you say larger canopy type, is that's class 3 or class 4? Or what is that?
I would say class 3 or class 4. So in the downtown streetscape design manual, 100% of the trees are required to be class 4, you know, unless there's a way to get around that. So I think, you know, if we required 75% of them to be 3 or 4, it allows for a lot more flexibility, but still the majority of the trees will be larger trees that provide shade.
Okay, and that is for.
Before you, I don't want you to leave that section. Okay.
That's going to be, that recommendation is for residential streets and arterials and collectors.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll update that comment.
Tell us when you're ready.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay, the thing I've been wanting to fix in here forever is this first paragraph where 2 street trees shall be planted for each street frontage. I don't even know what that is. Up to 50 feet in width. For street frontages over 50 feet in width, street trees shall be planted at a minimum average of 1 tree for every 30 feet. I really believe it has to say 25 feet. The 30 feet is a very old standard, and I went with the previous urban forester, Matt, and we measured like tons of areas. And the trees were not 30 feet. They actually weren't even 25. They were 20 to get the canopy. In this environment where there's less irrigation and it's completely dependent on supplied irrigation. So I'm not recommending 20, but I would like to drop it to 25, and it's the same in the previous section. So if you guys get it, 2 trees and 50 feet, that's at 25 feet essentially apart. Not 30. The same thing up here on that first. And these are supposed to be minimums, but these people use them as maximums. So under A1, And what they did in Midtown was 40 feet, which was not good. It's not going to make a canopy. They continued it, I think, on some other big street projects. So does anybody have an objection to fixing that right here, right now?
I think, to me, that refers more to like a residential lot. Where you have a parkway width of up to 50 feet. And what we're saying is that we are requiring 2 trees there, as opposed to where they might say we can only fit 1 because it's less than 60 feet. If there's 1 tree every 30 feet.
I understand. I just want to change where it says every 30 feet, like when they're not doing it that way, as you just said, Matt. Now they're doing it a greater spacing.
Okay, we'll update that.
I support that.
So you're saying getting rid of like the word average? So it
No,
make it
I'm just
minimum.
changing that word 30 feet to 25.
It's this one right here.
I don't think we should.
Well, we're talking about 2 different things, right? We're talking about width versus distance between trees, right? I don't know. I was confused with this language personally.
It is confusing.
It's distance between 2 trees.
So yeah, when it comes to a lot that is 50 feet or less in width, then 2 3 trees need to be planted essentially anywhere on that lot frontage, right? And then if that lot is more than 50 feet in width, then they are required to plant at least 1 tree for every 30 feet of frontage over, we took out that over 50 feet part, just ended at 30 feet. So if you have a 60-foot lot, you would still need to plant 2 trees. If you have a 90-foot lot, you would have to plant 3 trees. Now, it doesn't speak to the minimum distance between them, just essentially the number of trees required, which is based on the width of the lot.
And so my first question is, do we mean width or length?
That's what I was confused. It should be length.
Right.
So usually when we talk about street frontages or lots, we are usually talking about like the width, right? On the width of that, there's probably some.
Well, not really.
But
it's linear feet. It's tree
still length
spacing
on
in
the road?
linear feet.
I'm sorry, I'm
So,
hearing
Kelly, this section should be length, I think, 50 feet in length. We're talking about a street frontage, which is measured. That's the length of the frontage. The width of the frontage is like the width of the parkway, for example.
Yeah, the depth from the street back to the building, or versus the street along the roadway, which is a length.
Right. So I think both of those width uses need to be length.
Which is, it's interesting, like hearing you talk about it, just generally speaking from planner speak of how we would review it, right? That it's the width of the parcel of that distance from, this corner to this corner, that we would say, okay, the parcel is 50 feet wide. And then going to the back property line, we would then say, let's say it's, 75 feet deep, something like that.
Right. We totally agree. It's just that you're using the term street frontage, not parcel width. And I think that's where the complication came in.
Okay.
Like, if we were talking about a parcel, I 100% agree with you that we might say the width of the parcel and so on. But this is particularly about a street frontage. Those are the new words that we put in.
Okay.
Okay. So the street frontage is 50 feet long. We're saying 2 street trees shall be planted at a minimum average rate of 1 tree, and I'm asking for it to be 25 feet.
So this is also interesting. I mean, now that we're changing it to street frontage, we're basically only requiring a certain amount of trees per whatever is along the street versus what's across the entire lot. So we're actually requiring fewer trees now.
So this change was intended to get at corner lots. And recognizing that with a corner lot, they have 2 street frontages and should be planting trees along each line of the lot that is adjacent to a street, right? So it's not just two trees per lot. It's if you're on a corner lot, and let's say it's got 50 feet in length for each of those street frontages, you're then essentially planting 4 trees, 2 on each street frontage. So that's where that change stemmed from.
Okay,
So
thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. So as Mark has said in the comments, which is residential is not mentioned, so 25 feet on all frontages. Oh, he saw B, okay. But anyway, I just want to change the number to 25 because this 30 has morphed into 40 and it's become used on arterials, and it's really not the number we've been going for.
I think I have to disagree a little bit. I think 25
Okay.
feet is just too close for a large canopy tree. That's just
Okay,
too dense.
so if you want to keep it 30, that's fine. It just shouldn't be 40. Because how it's been interpreted is very loosely.
Well, maybe we get rid of a minimum average rate because that's where
I think that would be a very good thing to do.
Yeah. And yeah, my experience is in forests of the wild, but I know that our kind of local mature Ponderosa and Jeffrey 30 feet is kind of the recommended distance.
Okay, let's go with 30, but let's ditch this minimum average rate.
And the only context I want to provide there is that having it as a minimum average rate allows for, if they do want to have some sort of clustering or grouping of trees potentially, so that it's not necessarily a tree and then 30 feet later another tree and then 30 feet later another tree, that if they wanted to have potentially a closer grouping, that they could choose to do so. And especially depending on how the property is, what the constraints are on the property, how they want to be able to develop it, put driveways, it offers some flexibility in that regard. So just
Well, I'm fine with that. I just don't know even what an average rate is. I mean, what a minimum average rate is. Like, it's just not a term that I can understand. Like if I was an average person coming in.
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, something that concerns me is that if we don't put a minimum like that, people might plant 10 giant sequoias 3 feet away from each other, so there does need to be something like that to make sure that mistakes like that don't happen.
Well, I think I was thinking more along the lines of, like Kelly said, we need to have flexibility, but she's saying, well, what if we want to promote some sort of grouping? Well, we don't want to promote a grouping of street canopy trees because we want to allow them to grow to fulfill their overall maturity. And if we allow them to group, then they just plant a different type of species that can be grouped, which is fine. But the idea is to get a canopy that all grows together over time in our street trees. Groupings of trees can go elsewhere, but they probably shouldn't be even recommended for our street trees. That's my 2 cents.
Well, if there's this much discussion, do you want to leave it as is then? Except to change width to length.
Well, I agree. The minimum average rate should probably be struck.
Okay.
If we're going to keep it at 30.
And maybe it's at a spacing of 1 tree for every
Yeah.
30 feet.
Yep.
At least people would understand what we're getting at.
Okay.
Right.
So to clarify, both for the residential street section and the arterial collector sections, we're not changing it from 30 feet to 25 feet. We're keeping
Right.
that as is, changing the word width to length, removing the phrasing about minimum average rate and replacing that with at a spacing of 1 tree for every 30 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What else?
I think that's in your ballpark, Matt. So what else? Did we
Is
deal
there
with the
anything else
soil
in here?
issue?
Yeah, Matt.
Did we deal with the
Did
soil
we-
issue adequately?
Yep.
Sure. If you go down to landscape medians, I suggested changing the minimum requirement to 8 feet from 10 feet.
That was a piece that we were gonna talk with
Okay.
Public Works about.
Okay. I'm just scrolling through my.
And Matt, some of the comments too that you had, we talked about potentially addressing those through the public input process as well, kind of in terms of timing. The big ones to bring up to the group here. But
What would
I
be
know
an
that some of this-
example,
What
Kelly?
does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? Kelly?
So some of the additional items that we had not yet talked about with Urban Forestry Commission, that some of those changes would potentially get reflected in the next draft that comes out essentially. So you know, once we start working with the public and going through there and incorporating some of those changes, the ones that are a little more minor in nature.
Minor?
Well, is there an example? I mean, is there something we can address right now? Like, did we the biggest one is, did we adequately address the soil? Matt,
We've addressed it to my satisfaction. I think there's room for improvement in the future. I think this is, I think I'm satisfied with the improvements we've made in this draft.
do we need to address Civicel in the parking lots or in constrained sidewalk areas? I mean, how do we get at this 600 cubic yards of soil? Do we need to, like we did in the streetscape ordinance, just bring that over? Or what do you recommend?
I'm looking at my comments here. So under islands, in the parking lot islands, I was suggesting
added about
possibly
it.
encouraging soil cells when there is a space constraint.
Okay, do we have that? Because that's kind of a given. I've already been talking to that. Several people are coming in with car lots and stuff recently. And I've been talking to them about that very point because they have a whole bunch of paving. They're going to have so many trees. Some of them they had laid out well, some they had not.
And the reason I suggested that we encourage the soil cells is, you know, to that point, they have you know, only so much surface area. They need a minimum number of parking spaces, and they also have a minimum number of trees. So how do they, you know, also provide the appropriate soil volume?
Mhm.
Right, the only way to do it is with the Silvicel.
Well, can we add some language in the area where we talk about the soil volume in those two places?
Well, that's what I was wondering. We have a new section, soil volume. Can we just put, you know,
Suggestions on how to address it?
how to achieve it?
So that was in this section under trees where, sorry, I'll make this larger so you can actually see it. We talked about soil cells there. So these last two sentences were what was going to get moved out into its own soil volume section.
Okay, maybe we could expand that last sentence, soil cells may also be used. Maybe where, maybe we could phrase it something like, where space is tight, soil cells are encouraged to be used or something. Would that get at it, Matt, or is that too?
I think so.
Where space is limited, perhaps we could say.
Soil cells are
The use of
recommended.
soil cells is highly encouraged, something like that.
Okay.
"10 years from now, Kelly, you're gonna be a proud mama when you look around and see these trees. You're gonna say, I was part of that."
Hopefully my own trees will start to thrive.
Just you'll have to get some offline consultation from, you know, the urban forester.
Right. Okay, what else?
The other thing that I wanted to just touch on was that inert material maximum area of the landscape area. So it looks like that's under
It's up here.
so hard to navigate this. Well, it's an 1804, 804.
There we go. Inert materials. Yeah, up to 25%
Alright,
of
like 65.
required landscape area, and we had added installation based on my comments from the event.
Okay,
That okay?
I think so. Does it, any of the commissioners think about that for a second? We talked about that at the last meeting where, a lot of the landscapes that are going in, there's a lot
They're
of
all
rock.
rock. Oh, yeah.
Absorbs a lot of heat. I think Anna
Right.
had some comments about that.
Well, we talked about how much hotter it is in the soil underneath those rocks versus
Right.
those.
And we added that mulch, the requirement for the mulch at a certain
Yes.
diameter.
Okay, great.
Okay. So we've limited it to 25%, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great.
So in terms of it
that what
being
it
able
says?
to count for required landscape area, that's where the
Okay.
limitation comes in. It can count for up to 25%.
Okay. So
And
do
keep
we
in
have
mind,
any?
some developments have more landscape area than is required. So there will be instances where more than 25% of the overall landscaping
Will be rock.
will be rock.
Could be
Um,
rock.
Could be rock, yeah.
Kelly, can you, are we good, Matt, or are there a few more points? Just bring them up and we can quickly address them.
I think so. It's difficult going, flopping through three different,
Documents.
Versions.
I think those are the big items that I was concerned with.
So Kelly, let me ask you, you've mentioned public workshops and so on and so forth. I guess what I'm wondering is what might be the role of the Urban Forestry Commission? I assume commissioners can attend. You'll send us a list or them a list of times, dates, and places. Some groups have already reached out specifically to me, Cynthia, or whomever. Do you have any further thoughts? I mean, I suppose that you encourage them, because if people start saying, well, Kelly, I don't understand this 30-foot distance, you would want a mat there, right? So.
Certainly, and in terms of role of the Urban Forestry Commission during that process, I think that's flexible based on the desires of the Urban Forestry Commission members.
Okay.
Certainly, you're welcome to attend, encouraged to attend and hear those conversations. I think that there's so many different stakeholders that are part of this process, so many different perspectives. I think that will only add value to the process the more that we're
Right.
able to, expose everyone to all of those different conversations. But yes, we'll make sure that you are aware of the dates and times of the public
Okay.
meetings that we
And
have.
look, we have to accept that we've missed some stuff. I mean, and people are going to find stuff and they're going to have really good points. And we're going to have to rethink some things from a practical standpoint. If someone says this isn't practical or this doesn't make sense, you say this here and that's inconsistent, it's very possible that there's going to be instances like that. So is the thought, I guess I'll ask Kelly and Jamie to continue on our Urban Forestry Commission regular meeting schedule, or we could still add additional meetings if you need the group. Like, let's say you come up against something and some group made some really important points that should be discussed by the commission. Maybe instead of waiting to the end, maybe bring them up as you hear them. Like at each meeting, well, the last 3 weeks I met with 2 groups and here's what I'm hearing.
So I think depending on the time sensitivity of what comes with the public input process, if we need to call a special meeting, then hopefully we're able to, get enough for a quorum.
Yeah.
However, I do want to recommend that we still stick with our regular meeting schedule, because there are, there's other Urban Forestry
Right.
Commission business we need to do. To jump back to a little bit with the urban forestry commissioners participating in the meetings. We just need to be careful about the whole quorum. And if we think that we're going to get a quorum of the commissioners, then we're going to have to post that notice of possible quorum.
Yeah.
So once we publish the schedule, it would be nice if the commissioners could just let Aaron know if they are planning on attending or not, just so that we can be like, oh, we're going to hit 5, so now we need to post something.
Right.
Can I ask, are they all going to be in person or virtual or a combination? Or
We're
how-
gonna
how
have
do
a
you see
mix.
rolling those out?
We'll have a mix. Some will be virtual, some will be in person. We're figuring out some of the details now. And, you know, one of the other pieces that I should mention is that we're going to be creating an online portal, so to speak, where there'll be more information for folks who are interested about the project, the process, the input opportunities, want to see drafts, want to subscribe to updates, want to submit digital, you know, feedback, all of those things. And I'll make sure that you are all added to that subscribe to updates list too, so you see all that.
That's great. So do you want this group to take a vote at this time? I mean, maybe make a last call for, I mean, Matt, I know it's hard to think, but just, I think Kelly said, like, if you miss something, we're going to have to bring it up at a future commission meeting or something, or talk to her offline. You know, like,
Right. The only only other thing I could see right now is 1804-807 maintenance
Okay.
under irrigation. I was just hoping that we could include something to just say that the irrigation shall be installed according to accepted details and specifications located in the Public Works Design Manual. I know that's implied, but it's kind
can
of
you
one of those
stop
things
right
where,
here? It says everything shall be irrigated unless approved by administrator. I guess that I can't even imagine a world where it's not irrigated. We just don't have enough water. But it would be in here somewhere, Matt?
yes, I just, and the reason I say that is because, you know, saying that you're irrigating it could mean that you're putting one drip emitter at a tree, which that's why the trees don't grow. So,
Okay, so what are you recommending?
I was just hoping to just say, irrigation shall be installed according to accepted details and specifications located in the Public Works Design Manual.
Okay, can we add that?
That's
Kelly?
great.
So Matt, I'm going to ask you to repeat that. I'm starting to type a little bit slower. If you wouldn't mind either repeating it or putting it in the chat.
Sure, I'll put it right in the chat.
Okay, and then I'm going to grab it before we get off the chat, since I can't see the chat now, but I will grab it and we'll put that in.
Put it in there. Great.
I got as far as irrigation shall be in.
And then Kelly, just when you and I were talking about this before, you mentioned that maybe we should just say that specifically for the trees in the right of way, and possibly exclude ones on private property.
For which?
Matt, you just added a layer of complication. I mean, either a tree needs irrigation or it doesn't. That should either be installed per the design or plans. Maybe you could add.
Oh,
Works.
Yeah, sorry, I understand what you're saying. The council member, sorry to cut you off. You're talking about for that additional language in terms of saying it needs to be done according to the Public Works Design Manual. That's specific to the street trees. Yes. Correct.
Right, so that's
Okay.
right. That's specific to public trees, but so we've discussed that the details in the Public Works Design Manual are acceptable and encouraged to be used on private property, but we're not requiring them to be used. You know, if the landscape architect wants to use something else, basically.
Right.
Well,
I,
that's
personally,
a
I
good
would
approach.
prefer that they are used, but I don't think we want to require it.
Okay. What else?
That's all I have for now.
Awesome job, Kelly. Thank you, Matt.
We're at the point we can vote on Title 18 now.
Woo!
Yay!
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then I'm going to take the honors and say, do I have a motion to approve the recommended changes to Title 18?
I
I want
motion.
to second that motion.
Whoa,
We all
Anna,
have
whoa,
that.
okay, Anna made a motion. Gary seconded the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Do we have any nays? No. Motion carries with a quorum and unanimous.
Yay. Thank you, guys. Happy holidays.
Guys, that was a
Hey,
lot
wait
of
a-
work.
Okay,
Thanks.
wait, we gotta.
Kelly,
we gotta look
amazing.
good.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, happy holidays to you. You did not think we were gonna get here.
Hey, it only took 7
Do-
meetings, so that's okay.
It's what?
It only took 7 meetings, but that's okay. We're here. Yay. And we're going to see
We've
you
been
again,
looking at
probably
it for
next year.
7 years, so.
Oh, yes.
Right, 7
meetings,
meetings, 7
it's like
years,
never-
you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
good luck. Okay, well, with that, does any commissioner have any other comments they'd like to make before we open it to public comment?
I just
Seeing
wanted to
none?
say one more time, thank you guys so much for having me on here.
Thank you, Gary.
We couldn't have done it
We're
without
blessed
you,
to
Gary.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, gang.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Agenda item, public comment. Is there anybody who is participating in this meeting that would like to give public comment before we sign off for the evening?
We are down to 2 virtual attendees and neither one have raised their hand. I will make sure by asking them if they would like to give public comment to raise
your
their
hand.
virtual hand. And we are good. So we have no one wishing to provide public comment.
Okay, that leads us to a motion to adjourn. Who would like to make that motion? Gary, do us the honors.
I, Gary Gentank, wish to make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor? Anybody second?
Oh, wait, I'll second Anna Higgins.
Yay, Anna. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Have a
Have a
good
great
night,
night,
everyone.
guys.
Night.